Okay, this is episode 3 of Esports Salon, unless I've just completely forgotten an episode, which is certainly possible, so maybe it says number 4 down there. If it doesn't, then I've also just wasted everyone's time when it might actually be episode 3. That's how I start my shows. So this is episode 3, possibly, of Esports Salon, and I am Thorin. That part's correct. I'm definitely Thorin. It'd be funny if I said I was someone else's name. My guests for this episode are in the top right-hand corner, MonteCristo, because he actually contractually obliges me that I have to put him in the top and to the right because he thinks that somehow creates an image in the viewer's mind of like his status within the esports community. He's very narcissistic individual actually, but yeah.
I actually prefer top and to the left, considering most of my viewers speak English and therefore read left to right. So I actually want them to see me first, but you already fucked that up. So
well, it's because I actually want to build your fan base in Arabic countries, and enough said about that part. So now we go to the bottom right section, which is where Semmler is. Oh, by the way, MonteCristo, famous League of Legends caster, now moving into the Overwatch domain. Then we've got in the bottom right, Semmler, best known for his times in Counter-Strike with his duo. I don't know why I mentioned that. I'm not going to mention everyone's duo. Fuck that. Right. There's only the people on this show. The other ones don't exist. They have to get their own shows. So Semmler is from CSGO. And back in the day, he used to do like a tiny bit of like Bloodline Champions and StarCraft 2. And he once got up on a big stage in the Ericsson Globe Arena in Stockholm, Sweden, and tripped over in front of everyone in the whole audience, and then tried to style it out like he didn't do that, but he did, and we've all watched the video about 1 million times. So just in case anyone from other games doesn't know you, Semmler, they need to know your greatest hits, like the big moments in your career, you know. What formed you as a man?
Googling that right now.
Listen, Master Semmler, why do we fall? To pick ourselves up in front of...
that like a boss.
You did all right. You did all right.
Bring that up like a negative.
Google actually filled it out for me. I did Semmler trips, and he was like on
good,
stage
isn't it?
instantly.
Yeah.
I also like that you make fun of Semmler for literally tripping Duncan when you have metaphorically tripped so many times in your career right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't go through all of those. I mean, there'd be an entire show on that shit.
That's probably because I'm the host. And again, the control setting is all important to me in all occasions. So the last person is Capitalist from Dota 2. And what should we actually say about him? Well, I mean, he's someone where he's actually...
I'm a lowly pleb.
Yeah, he's someone who's...
Bottom left, right?
He's grinding his way up the industry, but he's reaching the top tier now. He's doing the international, everything. All the dreams are coming true for him until this show. And this could be the end for you, Capitalists. Because you have to understand, the people we're going to talk about on this show made you, as they will remind you on a daily basis. So they may destroy you as well.
Yeah,
and if they do, by the way, don't worry. Like, I will give you like a proper send-off in the next episode. Like, it'll be like, we miss Capitalist. Like, we hope he has a fine career in... won't even be Overwatch because that's actually possibly going to be a big game. So maybe it'll be like Hon. I think that's still out actually. Hon's still out. I saw it at DreamHack last time I was there. It was amazing. What's great is when I saw Hon actually, Monty, the graphics in Hon look exactly like League before they updated the Rift actually. It still looks exactly like that. It looks amazing. I thought, fuck, are they playing old League of Legends here? And it was actually Hon. So now even though no one from Hon will watch this, I've just pissed all of them off to just start the show.
By the way... If you guys haven't seen it, the Heroes of New Earth Championship that was done in like a high school basketball
Classic.
court
Is
classic. One of the most
amazing
esports videos for how hilariously cringe it is in history. I absolutely love watching that.
But that's the sad thing though, Monty, is that unfortunately a lot of people in like the community, it's like got a slight cult following, but it's got a way bigger cult following with people who actually work in the industry. Like I think people who work in the industry love it even more. Like we've all seen it. It's a classic, right? It's amazing. It's pretty good. Okay.
Good stuff.
So the premise of this show is, see, this is going to give you an insight to how Monty's mind works. Like Monty personally was having some sort of like negotiation dispute with a company. So rather than just make it like, well, I think I should be paid fairly, he was like, you know what? I am the whole world. Solipsism is actually a life philosophy. So I think the whole community and the entire scene is fucked. And let's all explain, obviously by proxy referring to my own situation, why the entire community sucks, is fucked. And I want all people who are big in other games to agree and explain why, yes, this community is fucked. Like, that's obviously a hyperbolic version of the premise, Monty, but that is the basic premise, right? You wanted to discuss the industry rates and how organizers treat freelance talent. That was the premise, right?
Yep, that's right. And fortunately, of course, it's hard to get actual people who are on salary who we are discussing here to be on this show because their companies will prevent them from actually doing that. So we're in a bit of an interesting situation, that's for sure, because it's hard to get any kind of counter perspective here.
Okay,
so I'm purely here just to take advantage of my independent status. Is that what's going on?
I think everyone's here for that, mate.
Like,
We're all here for that.
Cap quit his job. Time to pick him up here.
Now was the time. Now's the time.
Spill all the dirty esports secrets.
No, I just thought that you would be on my side for higher wages with a name like Capitalist. I just chose you based purely on your ID.
Fairly fitting, yes.
We already had a couple little talks on politics and economics a little bit already earlier in our chat, but
see, ironically, Semmler actually comes from Sweden, which is a famously socialist country, but actually does not in any way. That's actually anathema to him. He doesn't believe in spreading the wealth around. He believes in the 1% accruing 99% of the wealth. Isn't that the basic premise, Semmler, for your career?
All I can do is laugh at this point.
Okay.
I mean, I live here, and yes,
it's good, isn't it?
It's definitely a
those taxes
spiral.
are great, aren't they? Don't you just love paying all those taxes?
I know, it's fantastic, but then again, the city is beautiful. The infrastructure works. What else can I ask for? I have healthcare. I have everything I need.
do you have good public transportation over there?
Absolutely, dude. I haven't even thought about needing a car for the past 5 years.
That is the
since I
only
moved
thing
here.
I miss. The only thing I miss about from moving from Germany back to the U.S. was public transportation in the U.S. is kind of non-existent unless you're in a real
Exactly. That's the fucking problem.
So.
Okay. So Monty, where do we start this then? Because the story started in League where you made your video and it comes from that. So what was the basic problem in League for anyone who comes from CS:GO or Dota and they're not sure what was going on?
So basically, like the principal problem that I was having interacting with Riot Games as a company, as a freelance caster, and I did a video about this, which you can go watch on my YouTube channel. But if you want more in depth, but the short version is that, and I want to discuss this with you guys, how important these aspects are to you. But basically, Riot was underpaying their talent for the amount of work they put in, because League of Legends is basically an 11-month-long year of constant league action that chains right into 2 major international events that requires a huge amount of dedication of time with very little downtime throughout the entire year. And I think the most critical issue is, as casters, is that the Riot casters are forced to be exclusive to League of Legends. There is no other option. And also, they can't monetize their Twitch streams or their YouTube videos or really create any of their own content. They have to go through a lot of hoops in order to do interviews or to even talk with people outside of the company and get more exposure for themselves. So they're sort of locked into not only the casting, but also the creation of shows like Primetime League, and they keep just getting more and more junk added on. Like Jat has been doing teamfight breakdowns. They all have to do these shows that take up a lot of time, and yet they're still pretty dramatically underpaid if you take a look at what they actually, the extreme amount of work that they have to do compared to other like freelance casters in this industry in other titles. And they don't get bonuses for this extra content, for example, or even casting Worlds, the World Championship. If you are not selected to go, you're still on salary. And people may say, okay, well, the upside is job security, but I think we can talk about that, because there's not really job security for casters, whether you're salaried or not, because if if League of Legends dies, are they going to keep you on salary? Probably not. If you don't have any other valuable skills, it's certainly not at a rate that is commensurate with talent. And also the gap between freelance casters and Riot is, absolutely enormous. And in terms of freelance rates, Riot was paying very poorly because they didn't want to sort of, like if I got paid well to do Riot events, then their casters would think they should get paid at the same rate, which they should, in my opinion, for the amount of time that they put in. And it was actually so bad that, for example, for me working at BlizzCon right now, I'm getting paid more for 2 weeks of work than I ever did for 5 weeks of work at the World Championship at any point, right? So they're really not even close to where the market is right now.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
I can't even imagine being in that scenario. Like to be in, because obviously being a Dota, it's very different, but being in that kind of scenario, like I was in a place where I wasn't necessarily happy with, where I was at, my job and anything like that. But at least I knew that I could quit and I would have, many options available to me to be able to kind of do whatever I wanted. The fact that Riot controls everything and then also still sets such low standards is kind of scary.
For the biggest game.
For a game that should be kind of like leading the industry in many ways when it comes to what exactly esports prices should be.
Sure, and this is one area that's obviously a very good jump-off point, is that people who are outside of the industry are not going to understand, okay, because they're going to see, for example, in our game Semmler, that ESL has full-time employees, and they, in general, are only doing ESL events, and they're only working there, and they're on a salary, and they're not getting paid a day rate, okay? But what people aren't going to understand, okay, is that if you look at the history in CSGO, for example, the people who are the full-time salaried people who work for one company don't tend to be the tier 1 talent. They're people who... Part of the reason why it's good to actually try working full-time for someone like ESL is you can get your foot in the door and you can work it. So there's a balance to it, okay? In general, the tier 1 talent work freelance and they earn a day rate. And to tie into what Monty's saying here, the day rate that they would earn if they worked as many days as these Riot casters are would far outstrip what the Riot caster is making in a year. So two details. One, the day rate
makes up for the benefits such as 401k and health insurance and stuff like that.
Sure, but that's the shocking part, right? It's the notion that the people who work for Riot are also, they're sort of the ones who are stuck in this position, but they're also the tier 1 talent. They're the ones who could, in a different game, would be the freelance. What do you think of this, Semmler?
Who are we talking about when we talk about Riot talent? Are we talking about
everyone who's on LCS?
Jat?
Yeah.
Are we talking about Rivington?
Yes.
All of them.
Okay. Those guys, like those two, Kobe, right? Those guys I could see making significant amounts of money and perhaps more than what they make at Riot. The commentators like Azael and others who have come in afterwards, I don't see making anywhere near as much money as the premier commentators.
Sure.
The reason why being when you are tier 1 talent, you make a significant amount of money. When you're tier 2 or tier 3, when you're coming up, you don't actually make that much. You make perhaps more in line with your normal average job. That's like your normal full-time job that you would get in like RL, right? That's kind of how it is. I feel like right now the thing is that when it comes to tier 1 talent and when it comes to other tiers of talent, right? There's a huge disparity. There's a huge gap.
But that's the entertainment industry.
What they make. Sure, but we can't just blanket.
Sure.
We can't just blanket paint with a big brush. Well, all Riot casters are getting fucked. That doesn't work because certain Riot casters are getting fucked. Yes, because they have a big enough brand to be able to carry on their own and be able to do other things on their own. Other Riot casters who perhaps don't have the experience or the pedigree or the following, I don't see them making as much as the guys who have been around for 5-6 years.
I absolutely agree with you, and I've touched on this too, is that what Riot does, and I think what Duncan Thorin brings up a good point here, is that yes, it's wonderful for companies like Riot and ESL to exist because they can in fact nurture that talent and they give a livable income to somebody.
No, they don't. They give a slave wage. Like it's just I mean, when it comes to ESL, when it comes to others, they give you a baseline safety net. That's what they give.
I would agree, especially because you have to live in Santa Monica area of Los Angeles, which is
Cologne.
Or Cologne, which is extraordinarily expensive, right? So you have to factor in these things too. But let's say a baseline safety net. Okay, these people get that, and they wouldn't even have that. Not that much if they were going to be as a freelance caster starting out, right? But we also have all been there in that situation, right?
Yes, we have.
Like, it does suck, and I think that that's one of the things that ESL and Riot can do is develop talent and to give people the opportunity in order to get bigger. And not only that, but one thing that Riot does that's very good is that they actually provide resources to train casters. If you ask Riot, hey, I need help with this aspect of my casting, will you pay for a vocal coach for me? I know Deficio, Riot paid for a language coach to eliminate his Danish accent so he would sound more pleasing on broadcast. And Riot does this and provides this kind of support for their casters, which I think is cool.
They're doing the job of an agency at that point. They're doing the job of a promotion company, a company that is there to develop their talent and to be able to develop. You put a cost into an investment into this talent, and then you will be able to make more money off of them in the future when they become more appealable. That's not a word.
More appealing.
Help me, Thorin.
Appealing. More appealing.
Appealing.
Yeah.
There we go. But that's the main thing here. Okay, so you're talking about Riot. They're basically making an investment in these people, and so they hope to be able to maybe not make a return on this investment, but at least mitigate that harm to themselves. So they train these people to be better at their jobs. They give them the opportunity to improve themselves, and perhaps what happens is, if they ever do leave Riot, this is why I think that Riot have this safety net and why they're so fucking happy with the situation, is that, yes, okay, they're making this investment in the people that they actually have working for them. Where are those people? And this is the core fucking argument with your main point, Monty, is that, Riot aren't treating their people right? But the main issue is that Riot have a monopoly. So
exactly.
They're investing in their talent. This is something that we need to get out. That we need to get out immediately,
Precisely.
right?
Riot this is what
have a monopoly. They control the market. They control every facet of the market when it comes to League of Legends. And so, if you are a League of Legends talent, if you're working for Riot, you are screwed because yes, they're investing in you to become a better talent, right? Voice actor or voice training or any of this sort of stuff, right? But at the end of the day, where are you going to go? You get all this training, and you really can only stick with Riot unless you decide to branch off into a different game, and that's a huge risk. So Riot are banking on that you don't have the balls. It's the same sort of scenario that ESL are in, etc. Face it, that the grass is greener on their side because they're trying to make you think that the grass is definitely putrid on the other.
But the difference is, and this is where I think Riot's actions are unethical, is because, yes, they have a monopoly, but they're abusing that monopoly. I totally agree with you. There is a risk there. But the thing is that if you are going to be exclusive to a game as a caster in our industry, so let me ask you a question, Semmler.
Sure.
How much would it cost? So let's say Valve offers you a job, but you must be exclusive to only CSGO. What kind of premium would you charge for that? I mean, it's an enormous risk as a caster to not be able to do literally anything else at all. You were just in Atlanta casting Overwatch for E-League. And we can explore other opportunities and kind of move with the times, right? But the Riot casters have to live and die, and if League goes into decline, like, what are they going to do? And especially because many of these guys, not all of them,
what are they going to do? They have talent on they have experience on camera.
Sure,
but okay, Semmler, let me jump in.
They don't have experience ever doing another esport.
So here's a key detail.
It doesn't matter. Once you have the baseline of a commentator, once you have the baseline skills of a commentator, you can quickly carry. Within 6 months, I think that anybody who has quite a bit of experience in commentary can carry those skills over into another game. As a play-by-play, maybe not as an analyst, but as a play-by-play, you can definitely you can carry those skills over into another game. Easy.
Okay, do you want to know one way you can get...
They have that experience.
Okay,
they have that training, they have that experience.
Here's a way that you can get going in another game if you're a caster, right? Unless you instantly get picked up by a big org, what you could do is you could go on your YouTube channel and you could make a few VODs of you casting this new game, and you could make an analysis VOD. Oh, wait, you can't do that if you're a Riot caster. You don't have a YouTube channel. You don't have any sort of brand in that sense. Your brand is Riot, and you've left Riot now. You now start... You don't start at zero, but you go down, definitely.
you have social media, you have your Twitter, you have your Twitter following, you have everything else. I mean, it's not the end of the world. You can definitely build it afterwards.
No, but the point is, why should that exist for League of Legends casters, but not for anyone in any other game?
Okay. I'm taking it from a pragmatic angle, right? This is the situation that those Riot casters are in. So I try and look for the best case scenario for them right now as things stand. If Riot wasn't so overbearing and controlling, okay, obviously they would have a lot more rights. They would be able to build their own brands. They would be able to develop their own social media. They would be able to develop everything else. If they didn't, if they were to leave tomorrow, for example, right, they would still have their social media following. They would still have their reputation, sterling reputation in the case of Jack, Kobe, etc., right? The top tier. So I think that they would very quickly be able to build up a brand behind them. Riot, Monty, you've talked about this. Riot have definitely stunted the growth of a media side of things, which is YouTube, etc., right? Building their own media brand, etc. That Riot have definitely stepped in and fucked with that. Is that the end of the world if they were to leave? I don't know. I feel like they've got quite a bit of momentum for themselves, right?
Sure, but here's the thing, Semmler. I think when you're a company, sure, let's just say you're a company and you want new casters for your new esport, and you want to make, you're trying to attract commentators to your game.
Sure.
And you have a choice of working with the Riot casters, or you have a choice of working with one of the freelance casters in many games.
Yes.
So sure, you could take the Riot caster, but there are other big casters who bring a lot of stuff to the table. For example, with me and Thorin, when I started doing more Overwatch, we started a new show which brings our brands in a way to Overwatch, because we've developed a format for our talk shows, and we have a fan base around our talk shows that drives engagement into the game. Meanwhile, all of that content is owned by Riot at Riot. And there is no downside to them letting their casters create content, because it only drives hype for League of Legends, the game itself. And we're being denied a lot of awesome content that could come from the excellent Riot casters that exist over in League of Legends. So that's the issue. And if you're a new company, do you take, just as a question, you need big casters. Do you take the caster who has more tertiary content, supplemental content that they can bring in with a similar social media following, and a person who you've seen do multiple games, who without a doubt can transition games? Or do you take a Riot caster? Or you take the Riot caster? Exactly. So that's why I'm worried about them, frankly.
No, but the thing is that what I'm saying is that within 6 months, I think that any competent fucking Riot caster could be able to transition into another game. The other thing that you need to consider is, if we're looking at this from a fucking monetary point of view, is that there's a massive gulf between the top tier 1 and the tier 2, tier 3 commentators in any freelance space. I think that the Riot casters, the baseline Riot casters, make more money than the tier 2 and tier 3, for example, CSGO commentators.
I mean, this is just an argument about capitalism and socialism here, Semmler. Yes, the people who are tier 3 make more than they do in CSGO. The people who are tier 1 make way less. That's part of the problem that Monty's bringing out here. So let me add one more detail.
That's fair.
I want to add this detail to the mix, okay? Because capitalists, they've just been talking to each other so far. We've just been sat in these boxes listening this is it. I've got the best seat to now here.
No, it's fine. I was fine to let you guys go at it.
Okay, capitalists, you've just left a company, right, in Dota 2. So I want to tie that in, okay? Because in CSGO, for example, I've been billing ESL along similar lines to Riot. But here's an area where ESL is very different. If you were an ESL in Salaried caster and you left ESL, you could then be rehired by ESL freelance to work their next event. That will not exist in League. That's part of the reason why they have no leverage. They can't just go, right, I'm tier 1 now in League. I loved working with you guys for the last couple of years. I'm going to actually leave, not be contracted, but you can contract me for any LCS you want or any event, and you just go ahead and do that at a higher day rate. That doesn't exist, and there's a reason why no one has done that. So, I mean, Capta, speak to this yourself, because in Dota 2, this is happening to you, right? In theory, you could go back and work an event with the people you just left. So give us kind of your background for anyone who doesn't follow Dota 2 in that sense.
Okay, so I went into Dota fairly early on, and I just kind of grinded my way through. But my breaking point was I got hired by this company called Freaks for You Gaming in Germany, and I worked for a project called Join Dota. Join Dota was like the big project for Dota at the time, but it's lost ground steadily over time because they just had one big caster, and then other competitors came up and kind of knocked them down a peg.
BTS.
Yeah, BTS very clearly knocked Join Dota down a huge peg. So I was the first caster to be picked up after Toby, who's kind of like the name of Dota. Sure. Like he's been around forever. He's similar to like a sort of similar situation, right? For CS:GO, it's like
more like Anders, but fair enough. Keep going.
Yeah. So, but the thing is that I grinded my way at that company to going from a tier 3 that everybody hated. It was like hated is definitely the word to be used, to somebody who's now tier 1 talent easily. I was casted the main event for TI 2 years in a row. I've did this time around. I also did the panel as well. So I was able to kind of grind my way up because of the company. So I can see some of the perspective of the importance of being able to give your casters training and that sort of thing, and how that would hugely benefit them. But at the same time, you're only just growing your own studio. You're only really helping out yourself in so many ways. Even if you are helping out that employee and you're saying, hey, you're getting this training, you should be beholden to us because we're giving you this training, because look how far you've gone because of that. I really disagree with any company that ever takes that. Yeah, it's like it's something that happened to me. It was like, look where you started, look where you're at now. You should kind of be happy. But there's no way I would ever accept that, right? It's because my own hard work, and it wasn't even like I got that much training. But even if the company did give me lots and lots of training and set me up with all these amazing opportunities, and because of that I was able to make it big. You can only be beholden to a company like that for so long. So for me, during that situation, right, where I was quitting my company and I was listening to MonteCristo and listening to how Riot controlled things, that's terrifying for someone like me who, probably has the least prospects of anybody here when it comes to, like, currently when it comes to talent, what I could do in esports. And I'm always thinking, I want to stay in esports, but, do I become a host now and leave Dota, just so I can stay in esports and become a host and, be able to have this kind of, be able to do multiple games at all the time? Or do I do what I love, but potentially at a risk that Dota's someday going to die and that I have to move into a new game? And how well am I going to be able to do that? Similar, I think you said that within 6 months, any competent caster is going to be able to make the transition. But at the same time, there is an early comer's advantage, right? And there are only so many slots to be taken for a game. For example, like CS:GO is filled with 3 really good duos, like really, really good duos. And then the secondary duos after that are pretty good as well. I think that at a certain point, a game does sort of become, a bit full of talent if you don't get in there early enough. I don't know,
but this is part of it.
What you're not considering is that you need to be fucking swift when you make a change. I'm saying 6 months. Okay, if we're talking about a new game, then it's first come first serve as far as commentators are concerned. Simple as that. But afterwards, I think that a competent commentator, even with established talent, look at Sadokis, for example. DDK had been around for a while. Anders and Semmler, right? Us had been around for a while. Sorry.
He remembered the order is contractually applied to say that in. So
yeah, right. But
Semmler and Anders and Semmler.
You can still make a name for yourself if you are solid enough, and I think that's the main point that I'm trying to make, is that even if a game is established, within reason, we're not talking 3 years down the line. Once a game has been seriously established, like if you're trying to come into it, you're probably a little bit late, but you can make the transition. Dota 2 though, Dota 2, I don't, in the particular case of Dota 2, I don't feel like it's going anywhere anytime soon. So whatever.
The thing for me is that I feel like it becomes progressively harder to be able to get that slot, right? Like, what if another Sadokis comes in now, right? You've got 3 very premier duos that everybody loves. That's always going to get those major slots. It becomes progressively harder as more and more talent establish themselves. And I think where esports is going is that games are having a longer lifespan. At least that's the way I look at esports right now. Is that it seems like, you know, with you look at StarCraft, I think Global Offensive is going to be around for quite some time. I think Dota is going to be around for quite some time. We'll see about League of Legends, but I think we're seeing esports make a shift. Games are having a much more concrete, much more longer lifespan. In which case, that does make it harder for the people. Like if it's going to be around for 8 years, let's say, then if those are the established big top 3, top 4, top 5 esports where you're able to make a decent living as a good commentator, there's already going to be those established commentators. It's going to be progressively harder for the people who come in second. And that for me is just like, I look at the Riot situation. I think if I'm going to be there in 3 years, 4 years, what games are coming up? Are there already games that are like hugely established? Like say a new game comes out like Overwatch right now, that becomes, you know, one of the big established esports, one or two on the list. It kind of sucks that they're not going to be able to make that transition. It's going to be so much harder for them once the established talent is already there. And, you know, and there's a lot of people looking at Overwatch, right?
What stops them from fucking changing?
Wait a minute.
What
Sam,
stops them from leaving Riot and going over to Overwatch?
Love for the game is one. A genuine love for the game is one.
Yeah.
I had to make that decision recently where I was just like, I'm not going to leave Dota because I fucking love Dota and it may hurt my career, but that's a choice I have to make. But if I would say in League of Legends and I genuinely love Dota, I want to be able to stick with League, but at the same time, I had to balance that against me not being able to create any safety nets for myself, any build up my own personal brand. I wouldn't take that gig.
Okay,
like, I can do it now because in Dota because I'm independent. But if I was League of Legends, I would bounce instantly.
Semmler, I've got the exact answer for you. Wait here a second, right? Here's what stops them. Okay, first of all, you're getting a bit sidetracked by the fact that this is just one aspect of what's bad about working for Riot. But here's the problem. If that was the only downside, I might say, okay, let's offset that against the fact you're salaried. You can't really transition instantly in a new game without it being a big risk. The point Monty's making is it's that, plus you don't make the branding, plus you don't get the top salary anyway. It's like every negative stacked on top of each other. So I'll answer the question for you, Semmler. Here's what stops you making the jump, okay? You're right. Any tier 1 talent, if the day Overwatch came out, they said, I'm done with Riot, everyone in the world, here's my Twitter, I want to be in Overwatch, they would probably get a shot. But here's the problem. They have to do that. They have to cut all ties, be nobody, and then go from 0 to 100 in Overwatch. Because they don't have the option to go like me and you, let's try an Overwatch event out. You know what? Maybe I'll start doing a little bit of content. You know why? They've got 300 days a year to work in League, mate. They haven't got any time to do that. And they're not allowed to. It doesn't
work that way, Duncan. It doesn't work that way. If you are a competent, this is what I mean by when I say if you are a competent caster, right? If you have the framework built, and you have the experience and you know how to commentate a game. If you come into a game that is starting off fresh and
that's career suicide to do that, by the way. Going into a game that's starting off fresh that hasn't had any success, and you were a massive. Yes, it is.
No.
Okay.
Overwatch. Do you honestly think that Overwatch isn't going to have some kind of Blizzard backing behind it?
I don't know if they'll be able to make as much money as League of Legends, mate.
Well, let's say in an ideal world, right? You see a new game that comes up and you think it's going to be a home run, right?
Heroes of the Storm, and
you're 2-3 months behind on the launch, whatever. Sure. You know, things have started to progress. There's a bit of an esports or at least competitive scene that's starting to develop. You have commentators that are in the space right now, right? If you are experienced, if you have your framework set and how you commentate a game and you have the basic experience in commentating a game, you can move into that scene and murder all of the commentators that are in that scene, because your experience that you have from commentating games will completely cut the legs out from any budding rough commentator that is already in the scene. No matter how much experience and knowledge, etc., that they have, it doesn't matter, because you're going to be able to put on the better show.
That there is an example of that in Dota, relatively early on. There was already the established casters, but then Aaron Chambers came on. He goes by AC. He had radio. He actually had training in radio. So he came on and he just killed it from a technical perspective. Over
wait. Who are we talking about? We're talking about AC?
Yeah, AC.
Yes.
So he comes on. So I can see that example of what Semmler's talking about. But that being said, he did also, whether by choice
nothing
or
about
whatever.
The game, and so obviously that's going to be a problem if you don't know anything about the game. If you have pure fucking commentary experience, but you have no knowledge of the game, you're at an impasse. You're going to obviously struggle. Like you need to have a bit of both. But I think
there were some special things, right? Like AC, like he got in still early enough that not all the slots are kind of taken, right? Because the thing for me is I see events in like there are only so many slots in an event, sure. Right? So there's only going to be space for, let's say, 3 tier 1 play-by-play casters, 3 tier 1 analytics, 3 panel members, and then there's going to be maybe a couple of tier 2 guys who are tied with a certain organization, or they did some work in the online qualifier, and there's some sort of commitment there that they're able to get their chance essentially to be able to cast that land. But for me, I think those slots are going to be harder and harder to achieve as more time goes on within esports. That's just the way I see it. So
you're going to have more experienced commentators that you have to deal with. Monty, I'd like to hear your thoughts on all this.
Well, okay. I think that, yes, you could, in theory, make a transition, but I think what Thorin was trying to say is that it is much easier to be able to dabble in a new game without fully committing to it right off the bat, to at least get your name, throw your name into the ring, throw your hat into the ring, and that way you don't have to take a massive risk. Whereas literally, if a Riot caster wants to move into Overwatch, they absolutely 100% must quit their job with Riot and just like go full tilt, balls to the wall.
I mean, they better have savings right at that point in time.
Yeah, and of course they would probably, even if that failed, their name would be big enough to maybe have a crack at another esport as it was coming up. Sure. But we only see a major esport develop once every 2 to 3 years, right? It's not often that we see something that's really going to last 5 to 8 years. These things come in waves, right? So it is, I think, a risk for them because they have no way to gauge the community's response to their casting or to their work beforehand, and it could be an absolute disaster. And for me, personally, as a caster, I value that ability so that I can have a long-lasting career where I can say, okay, I'm going to like do a few games, put my feelers out there, see how I like casting it, see how the community's response is, see if I think this game is going to be going somewhere, how is the competitive scene being structured, and I don't have to make a massive commitment immediately. And I think that's one of the saddest things is that if Riot, now remember, Riot is a studio that has not made a game in 7 years.
Some would say ever, but that would just be a hyperbolic statement. Okay, keep going.
Some would say that they took Dota All-Stars, turned it into a redirect for their own League of Legends client download in the early game to basically just siphon the Dota community.
I would never say that in a call for, though.
In a very scumbag way.
Your words, not mine.
Okay. So the whole thing is like, if I'm a caster, I'm already getting nervous because in terms of esports growth and viewership, League is kind of plateauing right now, and it's probably already peaked as an esport title because it's been the biggest esport in the West for 4 years, and that's it started really kind of rolling in 2012 as an esport and got really big. But that's kind of what you expect. In my experience of being in this industry, you kind of you hit 4 or 5 years and it's probably like peaking, and then it's going to slowly decline over time, right? And if I'm a Riot caster, well, I start getting worried because I'm yoked to this company that has been unable to make a new game in 7 years. And even if they do make a new game, there's no guarantee that it's going to be an esport. And even if they do make another esport, there's no guarantee that I would be the first commentator for it, or I can even transition within the company to that new title as a caster. There's just no guarantees. So it's a lot easier to sort of transition as the market moves, which they don't have the luxury of doing. And they don't even have the luxury of exploring.
I've got a good example for you here. So Semmler's going to like this, okay? Because there once was an old young man called D-Man. Bless him. And the thing about this D-Man character was he was a Riot caster and he worked in League of Legends. But you know what? In League of Legends, he didn't have the option to do any other games. He couldn't dabble in anything else. And he decided that he was going to leave League of Legends for other reasons than just the game, right? In theory, he still liked League of Legends. He liked to cast it. And so since he was going to have to leave League of Legends, he decided he would, because he was going to work for ESL full time, he would go into CSGO. And this was the new big game, right? This was a really good chance. Like, not all the duos we're talking about were established at this point in time. And because he's a full-time employee of this company, they're sort of giving him the push, like, we're going to put you in like big events and we're going to give you your shot at like the big games, you won't necessarily have to initially have a duo and then build your way up the way everyone else did. And he was definitely technically a skilled caster with a lot of experience, and it didn't work out for him in that game. And he even acknowledged publicly that he wished there was like some sort of a way he could have not done the move to CSGO. He could have stayed in League of Legends. And now, here's the thing. There is one asterisk here I will acknowledge. There's a caveat, which is it was actually external reasons that forced him out of League of Legends. It wasn't League of Legends the game, and it wasn't CSGO the game being wonderful. But I will say this. If he'd have been able to dabble and he'd seen the same thing, actually, people aren't really like kind of vibing with me in CSGO. Maybe this isn't the game for me. Like, I'm not getting the same feedback even from people I might want to work with. Then maybe in that world, I mean, I've constructed slightly a fantasy version of his scenario here. Maybe in that world, he just goes, okay, you know what? I retreat back to League of Legends. No problem. No foul. Bless everyone. I am at my benediction.
There you go, bro. Okay. Bless him.
But here's the thing. The other thing about D-Man is that, and this speaks to more about Riot, is that under his circumstances, he could have lived in Cologne, and because the LCS studio was being moved from Cologne to Berlin, Riot would not allow him to fly in for a few days a week for the LCS, do the broadcast in Berlin, which is obviously a very short flight, domestic flight within Germany, and then go back to Cologne, 1 hour away. So, like, to me, that's absolutely ridiculous that you couldn't do that. But it's because here's another aspect of Riot. You have to, as a caster, you have to go into their office. Like, I don't even understand as a commentator why that would be a requirement for being a caster. Sure, you have meetings, but at least with me and with many of us, I assume. So I work for OGN in Korea, and I do prep with the other casters. We don't have to go into the OGN office. It's like if we fail to do our prep and do a shit job, we just get fired, right? But Riot has this big brother mentality where they want like the burning eye of Riot on you at all times so they can, I don't even fucking know. But like there is no reason for these people to like go into a 9-to-5 job. And with how much the league community loved and still loves D-Man, why the fuck can't you let the man live an hour plane ride away and just continue to, if he has important meetings, hey, look at what we're doing right now. We're all over the fucking world, and we can have a conversation about our industry. If we were all casters together, we could do this and prepare for a cast and have, it should be on the person to do the good job. And if they show that they're not capable of being a caster and doing their job without having to walk into an office, just get rid of them, right? But I just think it's absolutely, his situation was ridiculous in the first place. And it just goes to show that Riot really is very inflexible, even with people that their community absolutely adores.
Yeah, so this is another perk of Tier 1 that doesn't exist in League of Legends, essentially. Like you can't get a special dispensation, basically, in this scenario. Like, they will literally replace you with a random. Someone that is not known at all, has done a few small events, and they'll say, listen, I make people on my broadcast, and I'll make someone else.
Yes,
you're out.
Which is why, as a Tier 1 caster, you should want to get the fuck out of Riot, because their loyalty level is so incredibly low. And for a lot of us, some people who are casters are older and have kids or have families. But how the fuck are we supposed to live our lives and have a long-term career if you need to, like, if you want to have kids, if you want to get married, you're going to be tied to a location potentially. And sports commentators all over the world, it doesn't matter if they fly into an event on the weekends, do their job, and go back to where they live, because it's unreasonable to have people uproot their entire existence because you feel like moving the studio.
Okay, so let me wind it back a bit, because we went down a path where it was just about moving to another game there. So another aspect of this, what Semmler brought up was a very valid point, by the way, which is kind of what I touched on, which is that if you're Tier 3 or you're Tier 2 who wants to one day be Tier 1, it probably is a good idea to work for an ESL or a Riot, right? They will give you a push because you work for them. That's what they'll give you in terms of loyalty, and they'll give you an okay salary, maybe a better one than Tier 3 would get.
I outlined it properly, Duncan. they will give you guaranteed events.
Okay.
So a push, yes, but they will give you guaranteed tier 1 events. So keep that in mind. If it's ESL, for example, ESL.
Right. But here's the problem. That's all great until we get to tier 1. Now, everyone on this show right now can speak to what it's like to be in tier 1 talent, even capitalist. But if you're at this position, okay, then my point here is we can all appreciate, surely, and elucidate to people listening, what you get if you're in another game and you are tier 1 that you cannot and never will get if you're in League of Legends working for Riot. I mean, for a start off, I gave a pretty good one there, which was that if you work for even a company like Face or ESL in another game, or join Dota or whatever, if they had a big event and you really were like the best caster, they might still just hire you back for that one event. They might do it as a freelance thing because it would benefit them. In Riot's world, they're like, I don't need to hire you back. You don't exist in my game anymore. I replace you with anyone I want.
Even worse, they're vengeful. So it's like, the thing about leaving Riot that's also scary, I think, for the Riot casters is, in a world where Riot does create another esport, and you, like, left them in the lurch, like, they get really butthurt about that kind of shit. Like, they don't deal well with that kind of rejection because the company culture is so narcissistic that they have problems, like, understanding other esports or understanding people's motivations outside of the cult of Riot. And so, like, that's another, like, layer of problem to consider when we talk about that kind of work in the industry.
Okay, I've got a question here that's going to tie in League with CS and Dota. So I want to start with Capitalist on this. So as a general, like, setting of the bar, Monty's kind of outlined, like, if you work for Riot and you're a tier 1 guy even, you have a salary amount. Okay, it's not as high as if you were doing that much work and you made a day rate. It's actually not as high anyway as some people who are tier 1 in other games. In CSGO, I mean, this is one of the games we're comparing it to directly because me and Semmler come from that game, so we know what our day rate is, we know how many events we work. Essentially, we can actually choose to work more or less events if we just want to make more money or want to do more events. But I want to know in Dota 2, because I know Dota 2 isn't like one extreme or the other. It's kind of like a mix of the two somehow, because isn't there the aspect where doesn't, like, Valve somehow set how much you can make for the major and the international? How does that aspect work if you're a freelance in Dota?
So, yes, you're correct. When it comes to the majors and when it comes to TI, Valve set the payment. Fortunately, and that is, again, another thing that I've seen the comparison to. I feel like Valve is very easy to work with. I don't feel there's any vengeful things being said, except for perhaps about...
unless you're too good. Unless you're too good, of course.
Who is your contact at Valve? Like, who is your go-to guy at Valve? Like, who do you talk to at Valve? Is that
usually
chair or...
Yeah, I mean, everyone knows Bruno, so I'll just say I talk to Bruno, like, occasionally.
Okay.
So there are a couple other people that I talk to, but it's mostly Bruno would be the most public figure.
For sure.
And I will say that it's by far not perfect, but when it comes to what happens with negotiations, when it comes to, like, that has really not been too much of a problem. I think we get paid very well. I think for Valve events, I think they've kind of set that bar and have said, okay, this is where it's going to be at. And I think we're all pretty happy with that. When it came to actual negotiations, which I was not a part of because I was in tier 1 at that point in time, the information that I got from a close friend was that it was very easy to work with. It was just pretty much like, hey, you don't really know exactly what the number should be, but you're not really offering a good number right now. And they were like, oh, okay, well, you know, tell us about that. What do you think it should be? And that's the discussion that had. Now, I know there are different stories out there, but I trust my source quite a bit. But that is the thing that terrifies me about me is, like, well, Riot apparently is, like, very vengeful in that regard. And again, I would get out of there as soon as possible because I would never want to be.
I love this idea that Riot are the only vengeful company in esports.
No, they're definitely not.
The big man that's coming in. It's Halloween.
Semmler, all I'm going to say is this.
They're definitely not.
All I'm going to say is this, Semmler. There's a
Thorin
different.
knows about the vengeful companies.
There's vengeful, and then there's vengeful. Like, here's the thing. Eventually, even if someone's vengeful, one day you could get to a position where you're like, listen, I can destroy you. And then they're like, please don't destroy me. You're like, see, vengeful works both ways, Semmler. That's the difference. You can't ever get to a position, as Monty's career is showing. You can't ever get Riot to be the one who has to bow down. That will never happen. The best that could happen is you could meet on some mad even ground that isn't even. But in this scenario,
So I also want to just say, so when you give that example, so here is my negotiation as a freelancer with Riot. I gave them freelance caster rates in 5 different games, including Dota, and was like, "Can you please pay me a reasonable rate?" And they were like, "No." So, I mean, I gave them all of the evidence from talking to people at all these other games that I know is accurate, and they just told me basically, "Nah, we think." They literally told me, they were like, "We think those rates are too high," and I was like. At that point.
No, but Monty, that is the core fucking belief across all tournament organizers, across all games, ever.
But
ever.
This is what people in 5 other games.
This is what we battle against every day.
Yes, but if I'm giving those rates, and you're saying that battle happens in those games, and then you just know how bad it is from a Riot perspective, right?
Well,
it's even worse, right? It's significantly worse. And the other thing I want to talk about, because this is actually very interesting, because as far as the major esports goes, Dota 2 is the only one where you guys get cuts of in-game item sales as casters.
True.
So
Why don't
you explain that for people who don't know Dota? Because that is actually amazing.
So
pretty sick.
Basically, we're able to sell our online signature to people, and then people they open up chests, and then they pay the little bit of extra for that chest to be able to get our signature. They choose like our chest essentially. They get their signature on whatever item they roll in the chest. So I've got like an undying item with a tombstone that has my signature on it. When I hover over and I click on my hero and I look at the items that I have created for that hero and that I have equipped onto it, I can hover over that tombstone. It'll just be a big gold "The Capitalist" on it. Really cool stuff, and it gives us extra income as well when it comes to TI, and it helps, I presume, from a Valve perspective, it also helps them gauge the value that certain talent bring to the event. But that doesn't actually change the pay. It's basically a combination, right? Where we're all paid a good amount of money to be able to work TI, the biggest event that comes to Dota. And then they're also able to enable the best of talent with the best, best brands and the biggest following to be able to make that extra dollar. To be able to support themselves.
But see, that's the beautiful thing, is that they make money off of this. They give you a percentage cut off of your signature sales. So what they can do is they can set a healthy baseline for talent, and then if you are more popular, then you will reap the rewards from that. Valve will reap the rewards from that. Everybody fucking wins, and you guys make a lot of money off these signatures too. So
some people do, yes. Yeah. Some people have made a lot. It's
I like
a
how
little
there's that
less now,
caveat.
but. Yeah, some people have.
What he's saying is, please buy the capitalist signature at the next TI.
Who drinks your milkshake, capitalist?
I'll tell you right now. There's some bigger names out there than me. But when I first started, the setup wasn't very good. Where basically they had it so there was a contract, and they said, "Hey, we're also going to sell this signature." And they said that if you sold enough signatures, right, and you made the difference for what your contract was, everything after that would be yours. The first TI, I was selling signatures that did not go to me at all. Because I didn't sell enough. That was bad, right? But the next year around, they fixed that. We kind of told them, hey, that's really not cool, because I was basically telling people, hey, support me, and people thought they were supporting me, but that money wasn't going to me. And they changed that the next year. They were like, oh yeah, that doesn't really make sense. People think that they're supporting that person, but they're really not. So they ended up changing it the next year.
So I think there's. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I've got a detail I just want to mention for anyone also who doesn't understand this context, who's not an industry person. So here's the great thing about Dota 2 in that sense, right, is the numbers I've heard quoted for Dota 2 and from people I know are casters. Here's the key detail, okay, that number is high enough that it is actually generous for some of these huge events. So the key detail is Valve are actually what Riot pretended to be for a long time. So in the early days of League of Legends, it's true. Actually, Riot, if you were the salaried guy, probably paid you a lot more than some of the freelance people out there at the time. Rates were very low at the time. I mean, people used to get like $500 for a weekend for an event, right? So having a salary back then was very generous, and it was a really great honor to be a Riot caster. So the key detail here is Capitalist isn't negotiating his fee for the major, because he's getting more than even some of us in freelance games get for these huge events. So the difference is, if Riot did that which, by the way, they could, they make massive amounts of money, then there would be a lot less reason for us to complain as outsiders, and people internally would have no reason to complain, you know? Like, if they just got paid a flat fee that was really big, and it was like, listen, you're our casters, but we're going to treat you really well, that would be fine. The problem is, when you ask yourself, but well, then why doesn't Riot do this? That's the crux of what Semmler was saying before. Riot have realized, quite cynically, we have a monopoly. And since we haven't figured out how to make more of purely esports, why would we pay you more? It's a famous thing, okay, that happens in all games that drives me crazy about people. Okay, I'll give you an example, okay. They hear that an org just got big investors and that they just got bought out. So they go, you know what? Of course this player won't leave the org because now they can afford to pay their players more money. Why the fuck would they pay their employees more money just because they have more money? They'll only do that if there is market pressure to pay that employee more money. No one just comes into work. You've all been tripled,
or something,
you know.
I mean, whatever.
And Semmler brought up a good point, which is like, Semmler's asking, well, why don't they fucking leave? Well, Semmler, I think that under current market conditions, that some of these guys may in fact be considering leaving, because there are multiple factors here. It's what I call the caster cage that Riot has, where you can't make your own content. Yeah. But we have to ask, what is the value at staying at Riot? The stability, the popularity of League of Legends. But if League of Legends is plateauing and slowly declining, is your brand really going to get any bigger from League of Legends right now? I can personally say, from being a LoL caster, that it was very beneficial to me 3 years ago to be involved in the international competitions. I haven't really noticed giant increases in my social media following for the last couple of years. And so at this point, if I'm convinced that I have gotten, you know, as big as I can as a caster and as a brand out of League of Legends, and I have an opportunity, like at a certain point, you actually, the boost to your brand is not worth the lack of money anymore. It can be more valuable to take a tier 1 talent and go to a smaller game, but one that's going to pay you and treat you significantly better, because there is no more value to be gotten out of working with Riot.
Because of developer money.
Yep.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah. So, you know, it's
developer money. That's the problem with this whole Riot thing. Okay. I mean, yes, they can go freelance. They can do whatever they want. And it all depends. There's so many different elements that come into play when it comes into switching games. Is the developer going to back the game?
Yes.
When it comes to Valve, never. Apart from the international and the major. I think they fucked up when they did that. Or at least the international, that's fine. They got caught. It was a marketing scheme. They got caught. They have to keep doing it every year. And it's making a shitload of money for them. So it actually worked out for them. But for the majors, I think that they massively fucked up. I think that they fucked up. And that, you know, and obviously they're scaling back on the majors. So they definitely fucked up. And they realized it, and they're definitely scaling back. We have that same problem in CSGO majors now. They're scaling back. Because Valve don't want to get involved. They don't want to have to invest more money than absolutely necessary. Now, when it comes to other developers who look at it as a marketing scheme, etc., right? When it comes out of a marketing budget, perhaps, yes, then this is one of the factors that you have to consider when you're changing games, or when you're a new commentator coming into a scene. Is the developer involved in the game? Because those guys, the developers, have so much money. When we're talking about the big companies in the space, right? If we want to be frank, if we're talking about the big companies in the space, they have so much money that they don't give a fuck. And they're going to spend it. And they're just going to fucking throw it at people. And so it's an unrealistic point of view to take, in my opinion, when it comes to commentators and budding commentators in the scene, to count on that kind of money coming their way. Because
why does everything always come back to budding commentators? Like, I don't know about you, Semmler. You know my views in CSGO, and I don't give a fuck about scrubs on any level. Like, unless you are really sick, get the fuck out my face. Like, I don't care if you die in fucking like of starvation and nothing helps.
It's true, though. It's true.
It's like the Highlander, mate. It's the quickening. There can be only one.
Earlier, tier 2, tier 3.
We're here to destroy each other.
Those guys aren't making anywhere near.
Yeah. But what about tier 1, Semmler? Why am I the guy of all people? You're the guy who spent his whole career. Everyone's like, the greedy fucking Semmler. Bless him. He's driving everyone on.
In the TO point of view,
okay.
The TO point of view is that a tier 1 commentator can be replaced at any time by a tier 2 commentator who will then be nurtured into a tier 1 commentator.
Okay. And they're right for developer games. But here's the difference, okay? Even if that existed in CSGO and Dota 2, etc., they haven't killed the tournament circuit in those games. So even if there was a famous Valve League, right? Let's imagine tomorrow, Semmler, there's no EPL from ESL. There's the Valve Pro League, and that lasts 3 months and has a big LAN final. And you know what? I don't work for that because I don't work for my... I'm not a
totally different beast.
I'm not a Valve caster,
totally
you know.
beast.
They hire, like, well, let's just for a joke say it's D-Man, and they hire D-Man and someone else, and they're the Valve casters. Here's the key thing. I can keep my value high by working events that aren't that. I can do DreamHack, I can do Face, I can do E-League, whatever else. In this world... Again, here's the ultimate way to describe the Riot problem goes like this. Each Riot problem in isolation could just be a balancing effect to a positive elsewhere. In Riot, you just stack every possible negative in the industry on top of each other, and at the end you go, what do I get out of it? You can put Riot before your name on Twitter. Cheers, right? See ya, I'm out. Like that. Like, where are the fucking positives to balance it out? Every other game has a positive to balance.
Is always, it's just like the ESL commentator.
Okay.
The positive is that you get a steady salary and you have security every month of the year.
We've moved far. First off, I get that as an OGN caster.
But yeah. But that's different. That's different, Monty. You're in a very different little niche. You're in a very different little niche.
Exactly.
It's a totally different scenario.
It totally is, and I totally agree. And that's one of the advantages for working with OGN is because it is probably the most stable job that exists in esports as a commentator because they have the history, and any new esport that comes up in Korea, you can make that transition very easily because you'll still be working with OGN and you have that relationship, right? Like, I don't have to do basically anything to get cracks at every new game that comes along in Korea, right? So I have an insane advantage in that way, like absolutely nuts. And it would be nice if there, and I think it will as more broadcasters come up. Like ESL is a similar situation where their commentators get cracks at new games.
They do, but it's a fleeting thing, and it's based on the white label approach of ESL, which basically boils down to, does it work? No. Okay, fuck it.
Yeah, but there's more like when OGN does something, they typically like go all out, and
it's true.
And
I loved the Overwatch tournament from OGN. Holy shit balls, the fucking production value on that.
Yeah. So, and it tends to be long lasting too. They won't just do one thing and then quit, right? So, like there are advantages that I possess because of my position within OGN, and they are, I recognize, beautiful but unique to my situation.
Yes.
Thank you, Semmler, for your response.
I mean, what do you want me to say? Is that yes, you like Monty, you do exist in a very niche and upper crust.
But
here's the thing. You're the 1% of commentators. You know. Here's
the thing that's.
If we want to go that route, right?
My position is not going to be unique forever. It's just because it's been established in Korea for longer. Because we are going to move towards more professional production houses that are independent of developers eventually. Because eventually, on a long enough timeline, developers are going to get sick of paying for these leagues, right? Because they pay out the ass. And eventually, somebody's going to show up and say, all right, we're going to make one giant league, and we're going to have multiple developers with their games. And instead of you paying developers to have your titles and you footing the cost of production, guess what? We're going to rev share you in for your IP. We'll spend the money because we're going to get the big sponsors to pay us, and we're going to sell the broadcasting rights.
Perhaps,
right?
Perhaps.
So,
but this is 5 to 10 years down the line.
Yep. But once this happens, as new IPs, as new games come up, the pool of commentators is going to shift with that in the same way that it does in OGN, because that's the most natural progression for this industry and for our jobs ultimately.
Yes, it is. It is. But I like the way that I see it is that we are. I agree with you on your point. Is that this is a long-term sort of problem or challenge that we have, which is basically, and this is industry-wide, right, is that it's still 5 to 10 years on the line before we can even think about security, because none of the independent TOs who are running tournaments, right, make money, really make real money. None of them.
Part of that
it's only
to be fair.
No.
Yes,
it's only it's only the developer-backed tournaments, the subsidized tournaments, the sponsored tournaments by the developers, i.e., again, so long as developer involvement is in it, it's not going to truly progress, because that's just like a lifeline that's getting used until we can figure out how to consistently make this a profitable industry without developer involvement. then we're good. But then again, we can get into another point, which is basically that so long as developers are involved, we're fucked anyway because they control everything around their games and around their IP. So that's a whole other ball game, which I think is also.
But I mean,
Monty
kind of addressed that, right? Which is that one day, if someone says to Riot, I will pay you $1 billion to do your league, then suddenly they won't necessarily control it to the same degree, right?
No, of course. But if somebody that insane were to come along, I'd say go for it, Riot.
But it's not about the insanity, right? Because eventually the cost, even if you said to Riot Games, I'm going to pay you $50,000 to broadcast all of League of Legends, and I'll take over production of the LCS. The insane cost of the LCS, as long as they had a contract with that, they could still have some level of control about the presentation of their game and their IP.
Yes,
like that's
the problem, though. Is that
even if
level
it was
of control.
even if it was a small, of course. Well, for some companies, obviously for Valve, they don't give a fuck, right?
No, Valve don't. Well, Valve say they don't give a fuck. They definitely give a fuck, but they don't give a fuck, right? You know, like. They definitely give a fuck.
It's not cool to give a fuck, so they say they don't give a fuck. But you know what? Deep down, they give a fuck.
They definitely give a fuck about their IP.
Okay.
But they aren't as outspoken. They aren't as involved as other developers that I've heard of in the scene, i.e. the other big two that are currently involved in the scene. Much more involved. Riot, obviously so. Blizzard, another one, who are definitely involved and definitely very nitpicky about how you handle their IP. And so what I wonder is, it feels like that's a stymieing factor in this, where so long as developers are involved in that sort of way, we are not going to progress. But I can't see it. I haven't found the solution, or I haven't thought of the solution yet as to how to get past that developer involvement.
Okay, I've got a question then. So we haven't really discussed it directly. We vaguely touched on when we talked to capitalists about how Dota majors work, etc. But
sure.
Presumably, Monty doesn't know every detail about it. So do you have a question you can pose regarding how rates work, how the market forces work in other games or something, Monty? And maybe there's a discussion that can come out of that. Because again, all the games do work differently in that sense. Like Dota essentially is the same circuit as CSGO, but their majors aren't, the international particularly, isn't treated the same way as CSGO. Where CSGO, even the major is just another event. It's called a major, but you negotiate with the same company and they hire you if you're number one. Like in Dota,
I know there's farm it out to other companies.
Yeah. And so, what is the contrast you see in that sense, Monty, between like league casters and other game casters? Because in our games, essentially, if you wanted, you could go just wherever the highest rate is. You could make that your determining factor for a job, you know.
Well, I guess I don't really understand. Like, you just can't even do that in League, right? It's just there is no option to do that because there isn't much of a circuit. You're either casting one of the leagues and doing the two big international events a year, and like maybe a couple of IEMs hosted by ESL, which the Riot casters. Well, yeah, this is also messed up. We didn't even talk about this. The Riot casters don't even get paid extra to do ESL events like IEM. They just go there.
That is particularly fucked. That is particularly.
But you understand why?
Definitely.
Understand why they don't let them do this, right? Because if the Riot casters were to receive day rates that are far exceeding their normal broadcast day rates, which they would, then that would create problems for Riot. And to be fair to Riot, they don't force their casters to go to ESL events.
Yeah.
Which I guess would be the absolute worst. So they have a choice, but a lot of the casters want to do these events because they enjoy their jobs, and it's one of the rare times where they can spend time with players and casters from other regions, and we can actually get together and chat and have a good time together. So people do it for that reason.
Monty makes it sound like if you're in the Riot world, right, you know, you've lived your whole life, you've grown up as a Riot caster, like life's pretty cool, you know, you've been to Riot University, you've got your first jobs, you know, you've got your Riot doctorate, you're working at Riot, you're doing games, you love League of Legends. Don't know what esports is, there's just League of Legends, that is esports. You keep working at Riot University for a while, you get farmed out for a job, but then you hear rumblings, right, you hear someone in a bar one time say, the secret, and you go, what secret? And you go, suddenly that guy's gone, that old man, when you look back, you do a double take, he's gone. But then eventually, right, it's like the Matrix, if you really want to know what the Matrix is, like Neo at the beginning of that movie, you seek it out, you go and you ask around and you post on message boards somewhere and you talk to people, and eventually you get pointed in the direction and someone says, follow down the street and first door on the left. So you go down there and there's this door you've never seen before. And you open the door and you go down the stairs, and there's like a sort of a dark cellar area, and you come in and you think, right, what could possibly be down here? There must be some sort of like shadowy cabal or something. And when you get down there, right, there's nothing. It's just a dead end. But then you look and there's this tiny little area, right, with like a little like a copper thing covering a hole. And when you pull you look around, you make sure no one's looking. The Riot guards, there's no one there. Riot Light is off duty tonight. You open the little copper thing, and just scrawled in like a really crude text is just the word day rate. And just reading that word shatters your whole paradigm. Suddenly the world is in color. You didn't know you were in black and white the whole time, and the universe is just shattered. It's over. You are now the most dangerous man in Riot Kingdom.
And let me put this for you. So if you like, let's just
that's fire, Semmler.
That is beautiful.
Okay.
Let's put this in context too, with the amount that the Riot casters cast, because I don't even think Semmler, you may not even know. So, for example, an LCS season, all right, is 9 weeks, 3 days a week. So that's 27 days of casting per season for the regular season. It's 6 days of playoff casting, so we're up to 33, all right, for one split. That's 33 times your day rate for about 4 months. And this doesn't include, by the way, the other stuff that they should be paid for, such as the shows that they're expected to do, right? So let's just say that's another day right there. All right, so let's do 4 days, like broadcast days or recording days a week for 9 weeks. So up to 36, 42 days just for one season. Okay, they do that twice a year. Okay, so that's 84 days of broadcasts per year just for LCS and playoffs. Then you add Worlds, which is, let me count right here, 12, 15 broadcast days, plus the shows. Again, MSI is another, like 8, I think? 7 or 8 broadcast days.
So 12 days for Worlds?
15 days for Worlds.
15
plus the show. So that's actually, if you're doing every, show during Worlds, which none of them do. So let's just say 17 days, which would be average. So we're looking
days.
So it's like 84 days for regular season, 17 days for Worlds. I think it's 8 days for MSI, right? And this includes, again, the shows that they're expected to do as part of Riot. It's not including the articles that they sometimes write. Jat doing the team fight breakdowns, which is another thing that he does. So we're looking at over 100 days over 100 broadcast days a year, which, by the way, for a sports commentator, if we just take this out for a second and think about how many games a typical sports commentator does in a year, that would be at the really probably higher end, right?
I'm not exaggerating. From the little I know, MonteCristo, essentially what I know about how much you make from Riot, you could actually make as much in CSGO if you were just the freelance caster for EPL for a whole year. Forget the other events you do on the side and the majors.
Hold on, think about that for a second.
Just roughly we're talking here.
No. I just did the math. No.
What percentage am I off by?
You're off by about 35%.
35%. Okay. Well, that's just one online league. You also do all the majors and all the extra events.
So I'm just saying, for you guys, think about the day rates in the industry right now, and then think about doing over 100 broadcast days a year. The amount of money they should be making.
I mean, it's
okay. The thing is, I'm really loving, from a Dota perspective, being here on the Riot bashing podcast.
Okay,
I know, right? I know. This really does feel like let us narrowly penetrate the sphere.
It's like Monty just brought me in here to be able to argue against Semmler, and then occasionally be like, see, Dota does it this way. I think that
I don't give a fuck about that.
I think a more interesting discussion.
Okay, come on.
Is Semmler's talking about and there, I do agree, there's a little bit more inflated numbers coming out from developers when it comes to day rates and those sort of things. I think much more interesting is everyone agrees what Riot doing is not good. How bad it is up to interpretation apparently between the two of you, but everyone's agreeing it's not good. Okay, what about CS:GO versus Valve? Excuse me, CS:GO versus Dota?
Yeah, and let's. Who
cares? It doesn't matter. Valve's involvement is zero on both fronts, apart from the international.
I mean,
right?
I think the more interesting thing is to talk about what do you want the esports scene to look like? Do you actually
zero developer involvement?
Zero developer influence whatsoever. You don't want
zero
TI for
None.
CS at all. Okay,
get the fuck out. None. That's it. I don't want any developer involvement on any front. Period.
Okay.
Done.
Semmler is an ass. We will not be working with him again.
I know, right?
Jesus
but
Christ.
I would truly be happy with just having a fully free market that is just completely free, and also that does not have to follow regulations or decisions based on developers who say this is how we want to market our game and this is how things are going to go, whether it's good for the competitive space or not. This is how we're going to do it.
And there is something to be said about developers also crowding the space a bit too much, which is what happened with Dota, right? Majors started taking TI majors. They started taking up too much space, and it was keeping other tournament organizers out. And if you start kicking other tournament organizers out, you're also keeping sponsors at bay as well, which is keeping money out of the esports scene, right?
Okay, no cap. If I wanted to make Skrill, I'm gonna take Duncan's. If I wanted to make Skrill, if I wanted to make money, I would say, keep the developers in, please, sweet Jesus. I want the developers in the scene.
Yeah, that's true.
Give me the developers, because they will go straight into my fucking pocket. I will make so much money.
But see, that's the thing.
Right?
This exists because basically the developers are the ones who are making the money off of esports in the first place, because there isn't any kind of broadcast revenue like there is in traditional sports to be made. So it's been a marketing tool for them that helps them sell their games / microtransactions.
Yes, but it's also an initial investment on their part to get a league off the ground. And so they see that as a cost. They will put money into it as a cost. Then the marketing budget comes in. Then the rest of it follows. And if the game is successful, blah, 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 if the endeavor rather is successful, then everything kind of falls into place behind that. But if we wanted to make money as commentators, we would sue, as in we would sue the commentators or the developers. Please be involved. Be involved. I beg of thee. Give me your Skrilla. Like, that's how it would go. Because they have so much money, they don't care. It's just a budget. Sure. It's a marketing budget for them.
We are talking about multi-billion-dollar companies here.
Exactly. They have so much money, and then you look at a company like ESL or something who sold for what, like 86 million or some shit. Like at the same that for a company like Blizzard or whatever, peanuts, right? Yeah. So on the one side, this is why it's so difficult to find a balance. Is because on the one side you have these tournaments or games, etc., that are directly subsidized by the developers and have massive amounts of money behind them, just pushed into it like it doesn't even fucking matter. Great. And then you have the TOs who are trying to operate in the space based off of a very limited budget, based off a very limited sponsor pool. They're trying to pull everything in off of that, do what they can, and the costs are prohibitive. And it's really fucking hard for them to make money and actually continue from year to year, right? And so you have like it's not extremes, but it's very difficult to find a balance between the two, because it feels like you swing from one way to the other, and it's hard to set a standard. And I think that's what, as commentators, right, all of us have been thinking about, is like, how do we set a standard? How do we try and set standards across the board for all tournaments? And I don't know if I'm too jaded or I spend too much time talking to them or whatever, but I feel like it's difficult to find that balance where the TO who is spending every goddamn dime they've got and going from paycheck to paycheck practically, right, to make it work for us to have jobs, versus the other tournament organizer who's getting subsidized, right? how do you find the balance between the two to maintain standards? I don't know.
Okay, so capitalist.
I'm at a loss.
When you set that premise up,
hold on. I just want to talk with capitalist for 1 second, because before we go into more about Dota, I think it's important that you describe, because we kind of got you described the background and your being in Germany, and maybe for those people who don't know how the Dota scene operates. So you're back in the States now, and so what is your day-to-day? Because we've talked about how it looks like from the CSGO tournament circuit side. We've talked about how it looks from the League of Legends, like LCS League side. So what is your life? Where do you go from on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis as a caster?
Well, I can't tell you that for sure what my life is going to look like, because I went freelance during the down season of Dota, and that is the one big downside, is that TI takes up a lot of time, both before, in the middle, and then also after. There's a very serious off season. So I pretty much went freelance, and I was like, okay, streaming until tournaments start going on. But what my freelance should look like is that I have tournament organizers who talk to me, and I negotiate a rate with them for going to their LAN event. I pick and choose basically based on the premise of how much they're paying me, as well as how premier their tournament is. Obviously, even if they pay me a lot, I may not want to go to some shit tournament, especially if it comes to a location that isn't really preferable to me. But then it also comes to online casting, which is primarily controlled.
Deal with it.
The online casting, which is primarily controlled by the studios. So there are basically three main studios within the Dota scene. There is Join Dota, BTS, as well as Moonduck. And the three studios are contacted by tournament organizers to cover their online qualifier. And depending on the tournament organizer, they control how much, like, for some tournament organizers, when they went to Join Dota, they pretty much said, hey, you can go ahead and choose whatever talent you want. Other tournament organizers will be like, hey, we really want to be able to work with this person or that person, or they'll be like, hey, we decide everything. We're hiring you out for online qualifiers, and we'll make sure that we'll get Cap and Toby on for the tournament, but otherwise we're going to control the rest of it. Okay. So as a freelance, that means that I then go to studios to be able to get kind of my daily rate. I do online casting, so basically I get paid per game, which isn't great, but it's basically the small amount of money that gets me by until lands, and that's where the big money comes in.
So when you set up the premise there, where you were asking about CSGO versus Dota and what should it look like, is this something you were referring to? Because, for example, we don't have studios like that in CSGO. Each person is his own entity, and then the event organizer kind of like, it's like a buffet. They pick this guy, and then they put him with this guy, and then some of them, if they really want to, actually might not just always try and get the biggest names. Some of them might want to just try a different combo or something,
Duncan, you have to include the fact that the tournament organizers also own the content and will only run it out of their studios. So keep that in mind, right? Okay. It's not we farm it out to BTS or we farm it out to Join Dota. It's we need you on location in this spot in our studio. It's a very different sort of scenario when it comes to CSGO than it is to Dota, from what I understand, because Dota has definitely changed towards the white label approach, which is we will fashion our studio that we have built around your content, versus CSGO tournament organizers who have definitely said, it's our studio, you come and you work out of our studio.
So did you have a question along these lines, Capitalist, in terms of how you were pitting CSGO and Dota? What was the premise for you?
For me, is the way I see the esports scene primarily made up three parties, right? When it comes to it, basic organize, you've got the tournament organizers, you've got the developers, and then you've got the talent, and then somewhere in between there's these weird studios. Yeah. And studios are a big thing within Dota because of the fact that, as Semmler pointed out, we have white labels. So essentially, whenever somebody came to join Dota, we had a studio that was set up, and then we would switch things around to be able to get their sponsors and all that sort of thing to be a part of the actual broadcast. But it was basically set to be versatile, to be whatever. We don't have anything like when it comes to CSGO, going to the ESL offices to be able to work from their studio. Like, we have nothing like that. So for me, it was just interesting to, instead of just like bashing on Riot, talking about what exactly esports, what do we want esports to look like? Do we want only freelance talent? Are studios actually a thing, or are they just eventually going to be replaced by the big production companies that come along within a decade?
Monty, let me ask you this question. Since you, at the moment, are not in a position where you would be like this in an esports game right now, if you had to leave Overwatch and League of Legends, and let's say for whatever reason you came to a game like, you could, let's say you had equal interest in Dota 2 and CSGO, and you could make it in either game, and you would have a chance, if it was a choice on this level, would you like to be a pure freelance and do all the events, or would you like to try and join a studio? Which right now, hearing this, would you rather do you think? Which would be appealing?
I would rather be a pure freelance caster, and I'm a big advocate of just the entire industry moving to freelance, because I think it makes things both easier for the casters and for the developers, because they don't have necessarily obligations to use any talent, and the talent doesn't have any obligations to do a specific event. So it just maximizes the amount of choice that everybody has in the equation, and makes it more, I think, it also makes it just easier to adjust to things on the fly. If the broadcaster doesn't like what a certain caster is doing, they can get rid of them. If a caster doesn't like what a broadcaster is doing, they can just leave. I think it just makes more sense as a whole. Makes for a more
competitive space.
It also does. It makes it more competitive, which I think is beneficial for everybody, because it forces the casters to work harder to be better, and it forces the broadcast. The actual broadcasters to fight for the best talent.
Semmler, I've got a question for you. Would you like it if Room on Fire was a studio and you got to decide, events came to you, marketed with you did the development side of things, whatever, in terms of how the studio worked, almost? Would you like that to exist in CSGO?
If I wanted to make money, yes.
Okay, I'm talking about a world where you're not just trying to fuck all of us. Like, can you conceive of like that sci-fi world for a second? It's not like a Black Mirror episode. Imagine that world. Like,
I don't know. Okay,
come on,
hit me. Model perspective, 3 years ago or 2 and change ago, when we created Room on Fire, right? What I wanted to do was to create a white label studio in Stockholm that would be able to approach these tournament organizers and say, I want to host the online portion of your league. You will pay me X. I will cast for X, and everything, everything meets, right? That would have been a very solid, for us, right? Considering we don't have any costs, really, like all the factors included, would have been a very solid business model.
Sure.
So at that point in time, it would have been a very good move to make.
I mean, Semmler once worked for a studio, right?
So why didn't you do that?
Why didn't I do that? Well, I'm not alone in my partnership.
Okay, fair enough.
And if you were a caster, instead of you actually being the one creating the studio, and if you were just some new caster entering the scene, which scene would you rather be able to have set up? An entirely freelance one, or would you rather have a studio one, or even the developer one, which is more Riot?
Ooh, that's tough. I mean, as long as it's not Riot, yeah. I mean, I would have definitely gone with the freelance model. I appreciate the freelance model. I've definitely benefited from the freelance model. I think it's much more fun, it's much more entertaining, and it's much more challenging because you have to be constantly pushing yourself. And I feel like once you get that salary, you become complacent because you have that security behind you where you I'm getting paid every month regardless of what happens. And I know that DDK and Bardolph are going to get pissed at me for saying that, but I don't know. It seems to me like once you know
have guaranteed exposure, money,
Once you're making money and once you have that guaranteed exposure, everything, it's easy street. If you're on freelance road, then it's all on you. And I feel like that's much more entertaining and much more challenging than the other choices.
The thing about freelance road is it's a very scary road, but you get a lot of ass.
That's one way of putting it, yeah. I mean, it's much more fun. It's much more fun. Much more stressful, much more demanding, but much more fun because you really feel like you're pushing yourself to do something rather than allowing somebody else to dictate what you do with your time. And that's the thing. It's like if I wanted to have a safety net and be secure, then yeah, sure. Go work for ESL or something, and there you go, right? Never have to worry about a goddamn thing again in the world, especially not them promoting me or trying to build me as a brand or anything like that, because God forbid I try and leave the company. But, right, freelance. Woo!
I mean, I'll agree with some of that. That's part of the reason that I left Join Dota was the fact that I was very motivated for the time that I spent at Join Dota because I was the shitter and then I had to, actually make it so everyone didn't hate me, and everyone loves me now. But at that point in time, I easily could have just lost motivation. I wanted to keep going, and that's part of the reason that I left.
I mean, basically,
I felt like in many ways,
Capitalist,
freelance,
you went hard
better
mode,
opportunities.
Like you went hard mode. You went up against the biggest brand in Dota 2. Toby.
Yeah, that's the point, though, Semmler.
Literally every single time I turned
on
the stream, it was just like, "Where's Toby? Who the fuck is
this?"
You
went up against the biggest fucking brand. Good fucking.
Semmler, you have to realize that's the good part about the studio model. If you want to make people excel, it's like the Sith model. Okay, there must be two at all times. One to have power and one to crave it. And so you have to you have to just basically go before Toby. Like, I must destroy you now. I am the new Sith Lord. So
now I become the new master.
So here's a question, though,
Capitalist.
That
is actually an effective way. That is actually, we say it jokingly, but it is an effective way to motivate someone to push. And they will, but the thing is, what I worry, I don't know. I'm too much on the side where I would really rather see people succeed than tear people down. And if you go for the Sith model, like you describe, you're going to seek to tear someone down, regardless of whatever happens, because there isn't enough space, right, in that sort of environment.
Well, here's the difference, okay?
You're going to fuck somebody up.
The key difference I see in Dota, and this is one that's very subtle if you think about it, is that Dota isn't some pure free market scenario. I mean, we've described here the studio gets contracted, so you have to in some way either be in the studio, or here's the key detail. There is either developer involvement, so Valve, or someone who's a tournament organizer sort of says, I'm not going to give you full veto power on who works for the event or not, but I want to kind of have this guy involved as well. So the key detail is Capitalist isn't fucked if Join Dota did the next event, because what if the tournament organizer says, okay, but I want Capitalist on it as well? I mean, isn't that a key detail, Capitalist? Because I know a few years ago, I say a few years ago to try and add a level of abstraction, so it seems like we're not talking about now. I believe there were occasionally some sort of bruised egos, when people didn't get involved for events. Long time in the past, nothing now in Dota 2. But if some people thought they were good enough and they should have been on an event, but they weren't hired and they felt like it was industry politics, that might have caused a few problems.
Nowadays, it's all sunshine and rainbows in Dota.
Everyone loves each other now.
Everyone loves everyone, but there is still very much a political game to be played. I am not good at the political game, but I have to play it now as freelance because in order to get day-to-day work, I have to be able to go through these studios who are already contracted by tournament organizers to be able to run. But the really good thing is that the studio setup, it's not all bad, because I think we're highlighting most of the bad things, but I also would probably not be a caster without the studio setup right now, because the freelance road is so dark and mysterious, and because I essentially was given at least a good 6 months to be able to prove that I would be a competent caster if I was just given enough time, essentially, and I worked hard enough at it. But that was the studio setup that initially gave me that. I'm not sure if I would be able to take that kind of road if it was a freelance one.
Sounds familiar. This sounds familiar to me. I don't know. Where did I hear this again? I think somebody was talking about this earlier. Oh yeah, it was about this. It was about this company that was giving salaries, stable salaries, and time to develop with the biggest league in the world.
Yeah. I agree that is the big positive.
Yeah, studios are essentially
I'm
a developer, right? They're a developer light, right? They're able to still have some bargaining power and be able to control certain things, but still be able to give those opportunities to people and give them the stable job and give them the opportunity essentially to be able to shine. I personally now would much prefer to be in the full freelance situation, but given the fact that I might not be an esports caster without the studio setup, it does make me think twice.
Full fucking ruthless TO business. Why make the investment in somebody that is going to be benefiting somebody else?
Sure, but that's a problem I have in esports in general. Here's the thing. If you want to invest in someone, what you're basically saying is, I want loyalty. Now, loyalty, There's no such thing as loyalty that is just given. You must earn loyalty on both ends. The employee must show he is loyal, that he is rewarded, but also, this is where it falls down in the Riot aspect, you must then be worthy of loyalty yourself. You must then give the person extra things when they are loyal to you, and that's where someone falls down. So with players, I always go mad when people say, oh, this player, he came up in that team, he was nobody until that team got to the top of the world, and then he left for a lot more money elsewhere. Wow. In fact, people who run teams themselves will say this, oh, where's the loyalty? Well, the loyalty, mate, is you didn't give him any equity in your company. You didn't give him anything extra in the world. When he wins 10 world championships and leaves your company, he gets 0 from there on from what he invested into you. So if you want to get loyalty, reward him. So pay your franchise player some sort of equity or some sort of extra, some sort of marketing thing that he gets or some merchandising. Then we can talk about this aspect of loyalty in that respect. Otherwise, you're someone who was paying someone a day wage, who did a day's work, and at the end of it, you go, well, I mean, you have been getting your day wage from me, so just sign again for the same day wage. Don't go elsewhere for a better one. What kind of mad world is that? You're benefiting from a free market and then refusing to acknowledge that someone else can go elsewhere.
So we're back on Riot bashing again.
Well, no, that's a general way of saying the concept. If you want this loyalty in this way, I mean, if Capitalist owned part of Join Dota now, he's much more likely, if his percentage gets vested over the next 5 years, to maybe stay with Join Dota and build something. So one day when he's not a caster for Join Dota, he still benefits from Join Dota. That's not a ridiculous scenario to say.
That was exactly the scenario that I posted.
But it doesn't exist right now, right?
Right. No, there was no real opportunity, right? Because the opportunities when it comes to securing a future as a caster, I think, are a little bit limited. It's essentially saying, hey, I've got the talent and I've got the baseline, right? As you put it, similar to be able to commentate all these other kind of games, and then continuing to push yourself this whole entire time to be able to transition from each game.
I appreciate the fact and what Semmler's saying about being able to pay casters like a baseline wage, and that's a big upside. But frankly, if you were an old school caster, I was casting for 8 years before I got a full-time job casting at OGN, and I had a full-time job and was doing it.
Yeah, that was before Twitch.
Yes, that's true. It was before Twitch for the most part, and yes, things have changed in the industry. But at the same time, let me just make a different example or a different argument. This is a talent industry, and I understand that you're making arguments that there should be the baseline pay. But Riot is socializing the casters. But there's a difference between being a tier 3 actor and being an extra and being Brad fucking Pitt, right? There's a huge, huge difference there. And part of being in any talent industry is you get, until you actually build up a reputation and a fan base and people who want to see your art or your work or whatever, it just comes with the territory. You accept that. If you want to be an actor, you accept the fact that you are going to go to hundreds of auditions in the hope of making a name for yourself and getting the door open for you, okay? That is how talent industries operate. It's not a normal salary job, and the reward for that risk is fame and money. Yeah. Right?
You can say it, fortune.
And preferential roles, as an actor or as a musician, you get more freedom to make choices. And I think Semmler, I appreciate that you are trying to stick up for the little guy, and that I care very much about setting rates that are minimums. Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, great.
Keep going.
Anyway,
Keep going.
I
give me the little guy's share. I'm better.
That I would love to see a union form for casters, primarily with the original goal in mind of setting minimum rates so that new casters don't get screwed, right? So I agree with you, but that's what the Screen Actors Guild is also for in the acting industry. But this is fundamentally an entertainment market. And I think it's disingenuous to treat it as anything but.
At which point did I treat it as anything but?
Here's what's funny. I'll give you an analogy, okay?
I mean, that's the thing. Because
Semmler,
for me, I don't think that we are at that point now where SAG can fucking roll in and say, hey, by the way, you're going to pay us double overtime on every goddamn thing. Organizers are going to be able to fucking stomach that and roll with it. I don't think that anybody has the fucking money unless they're subsidized by the devs. Woo! That's the thing. That's the situation right now, is that if we want this to grow, we have to find some kind of middle ground between subsidized by the devs and the guys who are busting
Semmler, I've got a question for you.
Out to make it work.
Got a question for you. How do people working in a game who make 0 from the devs, who aren't subsidized, make more money than someone who is the best caster working for a company which is subsidized by a dev?
What?
Right? You are not getting $1 from Valve, Semmler.
No.
You are making more money for casting than the best caster for a subsidized by a dev Riot caster.
That is based off of current information, yes.
What else would it be based off? There's not some time warp I can open into the future. Come on, Semmler, you've got to give me more than that. That was garbage, mate. Come on, try again. Strike one. Okay, the sun's going to be straight down the middle, son. You ready? I'm coming at you again. Come
Give me
on.
your fastball, motherfucker. Give me your fastball.
What is your answer to that?
Well,
Semmler makes more. By the way, let's be real, Semmler. You are not even the biggest draw in CSGO. Yeah, you're top 3, top 2. Okay, great. You make more than the number 1 guy for Riot.
how do I know that? How do you know that?
I'm telling you that. Are you really going to question on some sort of like epistemological level on what I can and cannot know based on what information you know, motherfucker? Okay, Martin Heidegger, calm the fuck down. I know that, okay?
I only make,
Semmler is finding very not very creative ways.
I think Semmler's just angry that I'm implying I know what he makes. You think it's the Riot thing, like he doesn't know if I know what Riot people. No, he's angry the notion that I know what he makes. He's like, well, no, you don't. Maybe I make loads of money or none, and it doesn't matter. So besides,
so what's the point?
What's the point? So my point is, you just set it up right. That the big problem in the industry that's inflating rates is developer subsidy. And by the way, I'd agree in general. Like, for example, there is more money in Overwatch right now than can be warranted by the viewers and the size of the game at the beginning. Like, people are boosting it to start and try and give it a kickstart and then hope it all it's like giving someone a bankroll to play poker instead of them just having to grind from the lowest level of poker.
Playing with house money.
The problem here is that, not to bash on Riot, but to draw it back to that again, a problem across the industry is that it can't just still be about developer subsidy because, for example, me and you don't get any developer subsidy and we are some of the highest paid.
In some cases we do, though.
How do we?
Like the majors, for example. That's a developer subsidized event.
But
that
how
we
much?
make money
Be
off
real.
of.
Okay, Semmler. All right. So you're going to say the developer subsidizes the event, which is either run by ESL or MLG or whatever for a major, let's say. Okay, and therefore indirectly you are getting some of that money. All right, I accept that conclusion. What percentage of your income comes from the majors?
How can you know that, though, bro? Come on, mate. Come on. Give us an answer, Semmler. Come on. Hit me now.
Maybe like...
it is a very small percentage for 3 tournaments. 2 to 3 tournaments.
It's a very small percentage.
So, so even in a world where you did not receive...
This is a different scenario than... Like, CSGO is a particular beast. Like, it rocketed up. We, as commentators, people working in the space, benefited from that. The fact that we had fucking crazy viewership since DreamHack went in 2013.
He said about League of Legends. It was nothing for 3 years at esports after it came out, and then it took off like a fucking rocket.
Yeah, except that they gave into... Okay. Yeah, I know. I get your point, but I get your point. I definitely get your point. What I'm talking to is further developer involvement. We'll put it that way. Like...
But you're making it sound like the only thing...
I think the developers are going to get involved in the space now and in the future and just pour money into it to the point where it's not going to be sustainable or it's not going to be reasonable. But
for some of them it will be. And like that's just a risk the developers are taking.
For them. Because is that healthy? Is that sane for the esports industry? I don't know.
They wouldn't be doing that if they didn't honestly believe that they would be able to make money off of this space later. It's a proven model for the popularity of games. The most tangible benefit of that can be seen in Cap's game, Dota 2, because we all know how much money the International makes.
No, the International makes money off of the casual player base. That's all it makes money off of. It doesn't make any money off of the competitive player base.
He does have a point. Well, TI, yes, is benefited from the fact that they has own commanding image. It's what it's based all about.
Off of the competitive player base.
But the reason that many people buy the compendium is for the items that are attached to it. So
exactly.
There's a
we figured it out.
I think there's a bit of a mix.
That's the fucking thing.
I think there is a mix.
I mean, if I want to be at my most cynical, this is when I'm seriously in my cups, really dark, sitting at a bar. It's 3 a.m. and I'm just huddled over my drink, and I'm thinking, Jesus fucking Christ, These devs, all they really want to do is make Skrill, right? And if they're going to make Skrill, what have I been saying for the past 6 years to myself is that they're going to make it off of the casual player base. And that's always been the case. That's how
yeah, but it's not some kid in China or Russia buying the compendium, Semmler. It's someone who still knows esports exists.
Yes, and also you're ignoring the fact that the esports viewers... The esports viewers are often the whales in these games that are spending the most amount of money. On a per-user basis, I would argue that esports viewers are significantly more profitable for the company than a casual player.
No. Fuck no. Jesus fucking Christ, no. Not in any sense. Not in any sense at all. No, of course not. Are you kidding me? Like, esports viewership, esports player base, the esports player base has...
He's not talking collectively.
To expect everything for free. To expect everything for free. Their show is expected to be free. Everything is supposed to be free when it comes to esports because that's what they've been taught to expect.
He means in the game, though, Semmler, not actually on the show, on the event itself. He means as in the game they are spending more.
No, in the game, I don't think that they compare in a significant way to the casual player base because because the casual player
How
base...
How casual could you be if you spent $600 on League of Legends? How casual could you be?
Point.
No, the casual idiot is the guy playing Master Yi because it's on free week, Semmler, and he's playing it in normal games.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the casual guy.
Completely fucking crushes it. Sorry. I mean,
that's how unfortunately,
it is. Okay, I had a small... Okay, let me get, stroll down memory lane. Bloodline Champions, right? Bloodline Champions was an excellent game. Super fucking great game, right? And it was built from the ground up to be competitive, right? Only catering to the competitive player base, right? And this is when I came up with the analogy of the donut, right? So the donut, the way that it works, and this I think applies to, I think at this point makes sense, applies to all games when it comes to the competitive player base, etc. Is you have the donut hole, right? And the donut hole, there ain't really much in it, right? There's not too much. You put your finger in there, and not much there. That's the competitive player base. And where you're making your money is the donut, is all that sweet, sugary dough. Because those are the people who are actually spending money on your game on a day-to-day basis. And regardless, I mean, I like that you bring up the Dota 2 compendium, etc., as an example, right? Of the competitive player base is really getting involved, etc. No. Valve figured out that if they include skins in the compendium, if they include carrots on a stick, basically, with the compendium, they can get anybody, competitive or casual, to spend money on their game. And that's the root of it all.
We agree on that, Semmler. My argument was purely on a per-player basis, esports fans spend more money, on average, than a more casual player because they are more invested.
2% of the player base spend more than 98%?
That's not... No, his point is that one esports fan spends more as a person.
Per player, I don't think that that's a valid point. That's all. It's like on a per player, who cares? 98%
Basically, Semmler,
more than your 2%.
He also has a donut, okay? But in his donut, there isn't a hole. There's some jam in the middle. And everyone likes the jam more than the shitty donut, you know?
Really?
Yeah, that's the best part.
2% of jam is really
That's the best part of the donut!
98% of the fucking donut.
If you ate that, if you bit in that donut, there's no jam.
Saying that. You are the only person who is saying that.
And I am the realist in this group.
No, you're not.
As if you're the realist.
Responding to my point.
Capitalist. What were you going to say? Because you were going to disagree on this point. So what were you going to say on that?
I mean, I think there's some if we're going to stick on the Dota example, there's some Dota examples that separate a little bit. No, I agree with you, Semmler. I think that most people agree that there is going to be a significant portion of casual viewers that basically in some way funnel into esports, whether they like it or not. But there are certain things like for example, a compendium, if you get to level 1000, right, which is a lot of money put in, you get a miniature Aegis, which is the trophy for TI. Now, it's essentially anybody who's getting putting 1,000 into their compendium is probably only doing it for that Aegis, the way that the compendium works. Like, you must be crazy, because there's definitely better ways for you to be able to get those chests than just being able to put that much money into a compendium. So I think that's one example of, everyone who's gotten a compendium very clearly, who knows what an esports has put in, $100+ to be able to take something like that. And I think the signatures is another example, right? Where there are people who have made a lot of money off of those signatures, I think in total, it's probably a very significant chunk of change. And the only people who are buying those, yes, it's a chest, but they're spending the extra bit of money. They have the option, right? They can buy a regular chest or they can buy a signature chest and put a little bit of extra money in.
Put it this way,
the only way they're doing that, right, is if they know what esports is.
Put it this way, no matter, even the most cynical anti-Toby guy could claim that someone buying a Toby signature does it and they're a fucking casual player not involved in the competitive scene. That's like a way to say
irrelevant. We're talking about how much fucking money a developer makes.
No, you were talking. No, here's the thing. I will acknowledge you were talking about that. That is definitely what you were talking about.
That to me is the most important fucking point, though.
Relative to what? We're talking about rates.
Marketing tool. Okay. Esports is a marketing tool. It doesn't fucking matter. It's a marketing tool. We do it because we fucking love it. But a game developer looks at it and they say, how can we promote our game? We have X amount of marketing budget. So let's put it into this.
Here's where it sort of falls apart for you, though, which is that explain to me why Riot runs the LCS for, you are right. Riot has said that they have 100 million active users of League of Legends, active players every month. They're not, the viewership for the leagues is still significant, especially in places like China. And I think if you looked at the percentage of Western players that are viewing the LCS, which can hit several 100,000 viewers for an average game during the season, like, that's actually probably a pretty significant portion of the NA player base. But my question to you is that if you are correct, why the fuck do these devs even want to foot the production cost for something like that?
Because they have more money than God.
No, they're businesses. They don't just waste money for no reason.
Yes, they do. It's dude, businesses, that's how businesses operate. It's fucking putting your dick on the table and saying, I've got the biggest one in the room. Fuck you. Like, that's why Riot are stuck.
No, but here's the point.
Wait, are you saying the whole entire premise of LCS right now is for Riot to wave their dick over Valve and Blizzard and be like, I've got a bigger
absolutely,
one? So
absolutely. And if you think otherwise, you're delusional. If you think otherwise, you're delusional.
I love that.
I think
it's
a
idea.
massive
Thank you.
contest. I think it's them. There's no fucking way that the LCS is profitable in any way, shape, or form. With the costs involved, flying players into the studio week after week, giving players subsidies, team subsidies, paying Emmy award-winning fucking producers, etc. Like, the money involved in the LCS is nuts.
Yeah.
There's no way that they're making their money back on that.
But how do they make their money, Semmler?
It's just they're making...
Semmler, how do they make their money?
I'm making so much goddamn money right now. What can I do with it?
No.
This esports thing is really
Semmler,
cool.
Semmler, that's not it. What happens is they say to themselves, how could I make that money that I'm making already? What's my main business model? Casual viewers. So let's make all these people who are going to keep watching esports remain casual viewers making me money. Do you understand the concept? They're making all their money off players, yes? So everyone who keeps watching LCS, instead of quitting League of Legends because it's a game that you'd play for a year, like a rational person, and go to another game that's also fun, they keep watching and they keep playing and they keep spending money and they keep buying the new champion that comes out. So as a result,
so they make their money back. Don't get me wrong, but
no, they make more than they invest.
No,
whatever they invest in LCS, they make more from the casual side of it. Because of it.
I highly doubt that they can possibly make that much money back. Highly.
But they're making so much, Semmler. They make billions.
Yeah, they make billions. That's cool. That they're making that off the casual player base who have no...
Wait a second. Semmler, you called yourself the realist, and your entire premises for League of Legends is a rich guy just being like, see that diamond on my bitch's hand? I bought that.
Yeah, you're not even
just because I can. Like,
we're talking about a company that is managed by Mark Merrill. Have you seen the fucking comments that he's made?
That's not a good enough answer. That's funny, but it's not a good enough answer.
What are you talking about, Duncan?
Just because he's delusional doesn't mean the whole business model is. Okay.
Well, I mean, he's kind of the commander-in-chief, or up there with him.
Okay. Let's remember that ultimately Riot is owned by Tencent, and they have to have some sort of accountability to Tencent at some point.
I don't know if Chinese multinationals actually waste money, Semmler, on like pointless salaries.
Not even 5% of our yearly income on this project that we're doing. You know, we think it's really good, and Tencent are like, okay, well, but we're still making 95% of that. Yeah, okay.
What Chinese multinational company says, okay, at least we're still making 95%, so waste 5% of our profits? Come on, man, that one killed me right there. That's done. You're done.
What's a few percentage points off of billions millions of dollars. No, people don't think like.
Can we have some sort of animation made for me where it's a little crook that comes out and pulls Semmler off camera when he makes points like that, please? Like vaudevillian style.
We're all multi-billionaires anyway, so we definitely know how these people think. It's all good. This isn't speculation or anything at all. You know, like we totally understand.
It's falling apart. The furry goes, isn't it?
Is that they're making money, or they would stop doing it. Anything other.
Making money, but they making money to shore up losses.
Any other reason behind why all these devs want to go into esports besides that they honestly and genuinely believe that it is a profit-making mechanism means you, sir, are the one who is speculating.
Buzzwords.
Profit is not a buzzword. That will be the name of my white paper on esports.
That is what esports is.
That's the name of my white paper on esports. Profit is not a buzzword. Okay?
The fucking buzzword.
There's no way these companies are taking it.
It's just like, oh my God, every developer like, oh, what is this esports thing? I got to get on this shit. Holy shit. Does this make money? Oh my God, I got to get on this shit. And then they figure out, they go into it. They're like, oh shit, I'm going to put so much money into this. And then they're like, wait, I got nothing but my dick in my head. What's going on here? Like,
so Semmler, you think the great esports bubble isn't going to be created, but it's already there?
Oh, fuck yeah, definitely, absolutely. I definitely think that the whole thing is going to collapse when, I don't know. I mean, collapse. We'll still survive.
Semmler, didn't our own game literally get inflated by esports gambling that was purely based on esports, that no one would ever gamble on Team A versus Team B that were nobodies?
Yeah. Look at the viewership now.
No, as in CSGO as a game failed, mate. It was a game that made a small amount of money.
Dropped over the past nearly a year. Yeah. Ever since MLG Columbus, the viewership has consistently dropped for CSGO.
Okay.
So, you know, yes,
well, they did also remove all the viewbotting that was obviously going on Twitch by every event, even though they don't admit it.
What's that? Hold on.
Right, every event, either themselves or through someone called Bill, who was a mate of theirs, viewbotted their own tournaments and got the numbers higher so they could break the record. That doesn't exist anymore, according to Twitch, who banned Phantom Lord. Thank you, we are ethical. Shot on Twitch there, because I don't work for them.
Sure. If ESL, DreamHack, etc. were viewbotting their own events. I mean, that's their own prerogative. I don't fucking know about that.
No, but I mean that like it's not as drastic
viewership
as that.
Has dropped.
Yeah, sure.
So I mean, viewership has dropped across the board.
So it doesn't this like go into your point? Is that there was a tangible industry for skin gambling?
Yes, there was definitely.
And absolutely. CS:GO Lounge,
multi-billion-dollar industry,
based on esports.
Yeah, it was billions of dollars.
It was billions. So you're saying that the independent market was creating a multi-billion-dollar industry purely around esports, but the developers somehow lost out and are losing all this money.
And fucked up massively. Well, it didn't fuck up massively. I mean, they got forced. I'm just saying,
isn't that against your premise?
No.
No, but you said they only do the esports part to wave their dick and that they make all the money from everywhere else in the game.
No. Okay.
We're using surrounding evidence, the halo around esports right now.
Evidence. And so you can wrap that into CSGO and basically say, I mean, CSGO is the only game, apart from Dota 2. It never really caught on in Dota 2 for some reason. But yes, CSGO is the only game, if we want to use it that way, that really did have a solid, very strong betting tendency, right? Or part of it, right? Now that's gone, and we're seeing the effects of it. The other thing that I think is that actually we can talk about Riot as well in this. It's interesting to me. I find it super interesting actually that this is why I say that we need to remove developers and remove developer involvement from A to Z, is because their whimsical fucking desires and decisions are harming our industry. Because basically investors who are coming into the scene now at this point are looking at what happened to you, Monty, are looking at what happened to Valve with CSGO gambling, are looking at all of these sorts of things that happen overnight. From one day to the next, a multi-million-dollar team gets killed and a multi-billion-dollar industry gets killed, and they're looking at it like, do we want to invest our fucking money into this scene? Probably not.
I mean, it is fucking crazy that shit can happen, for sure.
Exactly, yes. So why the fuck should they invest their money into it? Why should anybody invest their money into esports right now? That's why I want it to get out of the developer realm and get into the businessman realm, where they are currently trying
we talked about this, and
then we can start talking about investment. We need
an independent structure that can actually move through multiple titles and have a legitimate governing body that will also do the sales for the sponsors, and therefore the developers can come to them and say, hey, giant league entity or broadcasting entity, you will do this and we'll give you the IP if you pay us or give us a share of the revenue for using the IP. And then you have actual independence, and they submit. Of course, they would still have some control over the presentation of their IP, but they submit to the governing body that exists within.
They can have zero presentation. They can have zero say on the presentation.
Okay, well, I think that's never going to happen.
Remember, could Semmler, the realist, please get back in the room, please? Could we have the realist?
They have zero say on the presentation of their IP. So long as that happens, so long as that is a possibility, then we are screwed.
Okay. No, the realist again, ladies and gentlemen. The realist.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just saying.
Semmler, could I negotiate with you?
Jesus, the way Semmler's painting this,
it's mad,
does
isn't it?
not sound good for us.
No, it doesn't. We're going to go through a rough period again, and then we'll figure out where it goes from there. But I think we will come out better from it. I think that, again, we will be able to figure out, like, the companies that have actual business models will survive and continue to pave the way. But I do think that we are in for a rough period at some point.
Okay, Semmler, I've got a question for you to bring it back on track from this derailed train.
I know.
How does anyone
off the bridge in the river?
How does anyone raise their rate in an esports game that isn't related to developer subsidy? Because that was your contention essentially. That's what inflates and drives it up. So how do we raise our rates without the developer just giving money away for free?
Demand, free market demand. It's basically just, are you popular? Do you have a say in the community? Are you accepted as a voice of the community? These are the sorts of things that TOs respond to and that will raise your rate. And if you are popular, if you have a brand, if you have all these sorts of things that Monty speaks of, right? Of a freelance commentator.
Sure.
Building your brand, building your name, building your voice, all these sorts of things, that is how you raise your rate.
Yeah.
And that's the only way, as far as I'm concerned, that is the only way, apart from developer involvement, that you raise your rate. Because otherwise, if there's no demand for you, why the fuck are they going to pay you more money?
Which is what brings it back to the Riot issue, obviously. Like, that's why the people in Riot can't have a demand, right?
But Riot is a bubble. We can't really talk about Riot because Riot are unique in the sense that they are a monopoly, a complete and utter destructive monopoly. They have completely shuttered their game. They have limited every way of them possibly. I mean, they don't even really promote their talent as far as I know. As a layman, like they don't even really promote their talent. They don't grow their talent's brands, and so they've actually shuttered themselves in. Unfortunately, that's the way that it seems to me as an outside guy.
Sure.
So, I mean, it seems like it's a dire sort of scenario for Riot, but they are also a unique beast. They have actually succeeded in establishing a monopoly in esports, and so congratulations to them. But they've got their own set of problems that they have to deal with. It seems.
Capitalist. If in like 10 years, Dota 2 is still around as a game, it's still a big game. You know, you're still a big figure in it. Let's imagine all the other esports games, for whatever reason, CSGO, etc., the rates all go through the roof, they go up and up and up and up, but somehow, to make it a quasi-Riot type scenario, Dota 2, for the majors, they're like, listen, we still think what we were offering is a very fair rate. Like, you know, we're offering you a lot. It used to be a lot in esports at the beginning. You know, I would have loved to start on that amount. And we think it's very good. And so even though other games might go up, we're going to keep the majors and TI at this level. And, you know, like, you guys should just be grateful to make it. First of all, could you ever conceive of that? And what would you do in this scenario? What would you think of this?
I mean, I could definitely conceive of it, and I think I would definitely leave, despite the fact that I am very deeply rooted in Dota, and I hope to be for a long time. Ultimately, I have other people that I have to consider, right? I have not just my own future, but other people's future that I have to consider. So financially, if it makes more sense, like by a long shot, it makes more sense for me to be able to move to another game, I would probably leave.
Okay.
Well, that's the thing with all of us. Literally, like, you are going to have to move games in your esports career. If you want to be a career caster, there is no other choice. And your odds are you're going to have to make those transitions once every 5 to 6 years. I'd say it's like, or at least you're going to have to start that process while having, you know, one foot in the old game and 1 foot in the new game, and then maybe you take a year or two to like fully like cross over into making another title your main title, right? That's just the reality of it. Is you accept that as a commentator, and we've all had games that we love that we've casted die and go away, and maybe the next game you don't like it as much as the game before, et cetera, but you just accept it and move on, because ultimately, if you want to make a career, you can't just stick with one title that you adore forever.
We're not mainstream sports. We're not basketball or football or whatever that's going to be around for 100 years. The average lifespan of a competitive game, average, I guess. I mean, CS probably fucks that up and all the rest. But it's what? Yeah, you're right. It's 5 to 6 years. So
well,
I mean,
even CS, there were different versions of CS, right? You're basically looking at Counter-Strike sequels, right?
I'm looking at Counter-Strike as a brand as a whole. We'll put it that way.
Okay, but okay, that's fine. And there may be new versions of Counter-Strike that comes out, but it changes the way the game is played. And it is effectively a new game. It is similar to the old game, but for example, I enjoyed watching StarCraft 2, but it is an entirely different game to Brood War, and I think Brood War is the vastly superior game between the two. And it doesn't mean that I can't enjoy StarCraft 2, but and even though they're both StarCraft games, right? Sometimes as a caster, even if you go onto the sequel or the newest iteration, you're going to lose something. Maybe it's a better game, right? As in the case that most people would say that CSGO is a significantly better game than CS Source.
I'm not talking about like personal enjoyment in casting a game or playing a game. I'm talking about your ability to cast the game, period.
Right, but your
Brood War, I mean, look at Tasteless. Tasteless, when it comes to RTS, I guess, like Brood War into StarCraft 2, Tasteless made that transition.
Sure, but it is still, I'm making a point, it is still a transition to a new game, even if it is a very similar game.
So ultimately, yes, we are part of the whole entertainment industry, and I think that's the very quick one-to-one. But we are still a burgeoning industry, right? We have the opportunity to be able to shape something that could be different than what the my question is, like, do you actually like the way that the entertainment industry is set up? Do you like the high risk, high reward scenario that is set up, or do you want to copy that, or you just want to be able to create something a little bit different? Because we have the opportunity to do so.
Semmler, stop talking about a little imaginary guy that lives in Guatemala who will one day be a CSGO caster on tier 7. Does Semmler like this industry as an entertainment industry where he is making fucking insane scripts? Shall I just pull in an ESL guy here and put his box here? Semmler is charging too much. The rates are like, come on, do you enjoy that?
Well, ESL would say that if I was charging 30 euros a day. So I mean, let's.
Do you enjoy that, sir? Do you enjoy that, sir? If you can look past the suffering that you inflict upon all the other people in this scene who can't make it to tier 1, do you enjoy sitting on a fucking golden plated throne with a scepter in your hand, bestowing jobs upon people?
Because, Duncan, life is a ladder. You have to climb.
And I'm kicking motherfuckers off below me so they can't get to where I am on the ladder.
Get the reference, motherfucker?
No, chaos is a ladder. You've got the wrong. I know your little finger, but you've got the wrong speech there, Semmler. Okay. So do you enjoy that? Do you like that sort of a world?
I missed the point.
Do you like... Oh, wait, say it again, capitalist. Roll it back for me again, mate. What was the question?
Okay. Listen, the thing is that we're talking about, like, we're talking about different setups, right, between these games. And for me, the more interesting discussion would be, what do we want to see the esports industry look like, rather than, yes, we all agree that Riot looks pretty bad or really, really terrible. But for me, it's like we could go the one-to-one to entertainment industry, and we could have a setup that is very much, as MonteCristo put it, you go through these areas where you may not ever be picked up. You go 10 years just doing the occasional, like, Geico commercial or some shit, and you never actually make it big. But for those who do make it big, it's very much worth it. Or do we have more established setups where they are able to create a talent industry that is more, let's say, sustainable for everyone who's a part of it?
But the top guy doesn't make the most money and all that, like this insane cut like that, right?
Well, I mean, I don't know. There's that one chick, Flo or whatever. She makes fucking bank. So, like, I would be a good.
Yeah, that's progressive.
Like, give me Flo's job.
Who the fuck is that?
I'm on that.
Oh, right, the insurance ad one, right? Okay. I thought you were talking about the StarCraft 2 females.
If I could go with Flo, but if we're talking about the freelance market, I mean, the problem, the situation the way that I see it when it comes to freelance commentators is I find it very difficult to tie everything together with a nice, neat bow and say that this standard will apply to all games, because it seems to me, the more that I look at it, that all games are different. All scenarios are different. There are different factors involved in every game, and it is very difficult to find a balance that would fit for all commentators and everybody working in the scene in each specific game. So
a guild or a union, like that sort of thing, an overarching one for all of esports.
For all games,
you don't think that would like that?
There could be something that can be established that establishes basic standards. Basic standards that these existing tournament organizers can definitely comply with, right?
Yep.
i.e. food 3 times a day, for example. Basic standards. Like these sorts of things, I think that tournament organizers can comply with regardless of the game. Now, if we're going to start getting into each commentator needs an individual hotel room, for example, or things like this, that's where it could get tricky because that's a significant cost. Far, right? We may not think about it, but that is a significant cost on the tournament organizer when it even just comes to fucking booking hotel rooms. It's a fucking significant cost. Like, it's actually kind of scary how much money it costs them. So, I mean, these sorts of things, right? That is where I start to come to like an impasse where I start to think, how do I marry or how do I get everything to come together where this makes sense from a TO point of view and it makes sense from a commentary point of view, because I feel like there's a lot of factors involved. There's also, I mean, from a pure business point of view for the TOs, the size of the game, the draw of the game, all these sorts of things have to come into it as well, whether it's worth making that investment. And if you are a commentator for Heroes of the Storm, asking for the same standards that a commentator for CS or LOL or whatever gets, you're going to be in for a bit of a rough surprise. So, I don't know.
Okay. Right, Monty,
I
what
agree.
would your answer to
It's
this?
very complicated.
What would your answer to this question be, Monty, then? What would you
Monty,
like
what
the
do you
scene
think?
to look
Monty,
like?
what do you think?
So, I don't see a way where it can't operate like a brutally cutthroat entertainment industry, right? Because we could ask, why did that happen in the entertainment industry or the artist industry in the first place? And it's no, it has nothing to do with how much money they make. It's a job that lots of people want because they perceive it as having a high degree of prestige and fame and fun associated with it. So it floods the bottom of the market with people who are going to try and take that risk to get a break, right? And so there literally isn't a business model that would work to pay every actor a baseline safety net income just because they wanted to be in acting, right?
Yeah.
So and for the most part, if you have these skills, if you have gone to school to be an actor, or you have some extraordinary natural talent, and coupled with the fact that most actors don't get discovered on their first time, they have to keep trying until they find the right casting director who thinks they look right for the role and have the skills for it, et cetera, et cetera. And then you start building that name because you get experience working on sets, so people are more likely to work with you because you're not a total fucking noob on a film set anymore, so you can be trusted. And you start to get fans and noticed because they are putting you onto a high-profile broadcast. So I just don't see a world where our industry doesn't operate like an entertainment industry, because otherwise, if it operated like any other job, then just the glut of people trying to get into it would be absolutely insane. It already is very large in any kind of entertainment industry because the perception of the prestige and the rewards financially for that job are very big at the high end, and must necessarily be, because as soon as you get up, the more it's like a feedback. It just increases over time exponentially. It's like the value of an actor goes up because people will come to see him or her, an actress, at a movie because they like this person, and therefore they have to get paid more and more and more, and they're given more high visibility roles. But it works the same exact way in our industry, and it has to, because people want the names that will draw the viewers. Then we get more viewers, so we get more famous, then we make more money, and it's a feedback loop that is very beneficial to the people at the top end. But how do you change that? There's no way to break that cycle. Because fans are going to be fans, and they're going to want to see their favorite commentators doing a game.
So if we're ever going to have any kind of moderating organization, it's going to have to operate more like a Screen Actors Guild, right?
Yes,
There's criteria set in place for the people
and minimums
who can be a part of it.
Minimum rates, right? Minimum rates is super important. And yeah, I do think it's possible to create a union or a guild Now, can it be as intense as the Screen Actors Guild or have that many factors around it? Absolutely not. But not yet. But there are things we can do, such as say, you must, if you want to be a Casters Guild approved event, you must adhere to these standards. To get guild casters, you have to pay people a minimum rate, which includes people who are not part of the guild, by the way, but you must meet this standard. Like I said, must have the 3 meals a day, must have, I would say, a maximum number of broadcast hours per day so you don't seriously injure your voice, or that's a basic safety protection for our job. These are things that I think you could push through.
Okay.
Yes. It's true. That is actually a very strong point, in particular coming to the hours. For example, San Jose, that's coming up this weekend, right? You know, it's going to be 2 analysts that cover the entire event through and through, right? YNK and Sponge. And should that be the case, right? Should it only be the 2?
You mean Sao Paulo, by the way?
Did I not say Sao Paulo?
You just said San Jose, but you mean EPL.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sao
yeah.
Paulo. Sorry, Sao Paulo.
Okay.
But sorry.
Sounds Spanish, Portuguese, same thing, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Portuguese,
okay.
Spanish.
So your point was there's going to be only 2 analysts doing it. So if it goes long, they're fucked, right?
Exactly. I mean, Duncan, you can speak to this. I mean, you have days, you have tournaments where you are on for every game.
Yep.
And that's a sort of scenario where it's like, is it worth thinking about bringing in a 3rd analyst, or thinking about forcing the tournament organizers to bring in a 3rd analyst to cover those games, and to allow for there to be a off game, or even 2 off games for an analyst, right?
Yeah.
So that there is some kind of rotation going on, so that there's less wear and tear on the individual. If they're doing back-to-back events, for example, these sorts of things, right? You're doing one event, you're thinking, great, fucking A. You get into the second event, you're doomed. So, I mean, it's these sorts of things that need to be taken into account.
Well, but if we take the very dark future that you see, near future for esports, right? If we actually do that sort of thing, then you're only increasing the cost of the tournament organizer and most likely bringing down everyone's rates, right? If you actually force to just, instead of have 2 analysts, then you have 4 analysts, you could switch back and forth, et cetera, then you're essentially just doubling the cost.
No, you're absolutely right, which is why I find it, or I mean, it's a challenge. We'll put it that way, right? It's a challenge right now to come up with an effective guild, or an effective union, or an effective group. Sure. That would apply these standards across the board to all tournament organizers. Because I think that soon enough, it is going to get into a point where it's going to be like that dog-eat-dog sort of world again. And then that makes it very difficult to negotiate standards as a group.
Capitalist, what is your vision then? What would you like the scene to look like in this sense?
I mean, true to my name, I'm a little bit prefer a bit of the cutthroat, but I guess because of the way I came up, the sustainability that was offered to me. No, God, no. Sustainability offered to me by a studio was helpful, and I could see how a sort of Screen Actors Guild scenario would help be able to ensure the tier 3, tier 2 area to be able to bolster it up. But I think there are certain risks involved, such as, basically being able to cost the tournament organizer so much that you start having to essentially crowd people out, or lower their rates so much that it no longer becomes really an industry that we really like as a tier 1, right? It doesn't have the same kind of appeal if you're not able to be that kind of tier 1 star. So I think if you're going to have a union organization, I think the minimums have to be very low. For example, the day rates. Right?
Yeah, because otherwise you're just going to have people undercutting. Like, that's the main thing, right? If you try and push for too high of a fucking minimum, then all of a sudden the opportunists in the group will splinter off, and then what are you left with? But I don't know. Maybe I'm too fatalistic in this sense. I mean, I only spent 1.5 years talking about it, so.
Yeah, but what can one know, Semmler? Really, what can a man even interpret and understand in his brain? We have these Albert thoughts, and can we really know anything? Let's ask this question. If knowledge was a donut,
I know nothing.
What would happen when we got to the center of the donut, Semmler? Nothing. A yawning chasm. We thought there was so much substance, but in the middle, nothing to grasp onto. So unsatisfying the deeper we go. Okay, so here's my basic point.
The darkness.
I have nihilist donuts.
I actually think one point that's worth making is since you keep referring to the film industry, well, funnily enough, the film industry was ESL, was Riot in the beginning. You used to literally sign up to work for a studio, and you used to just only work for that studio. And by the way, even if you were some top star, let's say you got good money, but they worked you like a motherfucker. It's not coincidence that those
Humphrey Bogart was a huge star, but he was in that system.
And they made so many movies because they had to. And some of the movies were shit, and some of the movies were good. Same as if you're ESL, you work the big event, and then they put you on some event you wouldn't normally choose to if you were freelance. But there's a reason why that system doesn't exist anymore. You know why? Marlon Brando. These sorts of people are bigger than just the top star. They become a star where they're so big that now one person will pay that guy one-off $10 million to do one movie, and he becomes freelance in that sense, and he breaks off from that system. And so, in a sense, I think actually that movies moved from what esports is now in terms of the salaried aspect, eventually, so that everyone is just a shitter version of the freelance aspect, or the top guy is the ultimate freelance guy. He makes even more than the Marlon Brando equivalent, where he can make like the $15 million if it's some huge movie, So I think in a sense, there wasn't any planning to how that happened in movies. So I think naturally the industry would move in that direction anyway. The question is more like the time frame of it,
Yep.
Okay, let's get a final point there, because this has gone on for super long. So, Monty, final point. We're going to move around, and then I'm going to shut this motherfucker off.
My final point is, it's been great talking with you guys, and I think that I hope this has been helpful for people who wanted to know more about the industry and up-and-coming commentators, about the different views that people have regarding our lot in life, which is, at best, highly chaotic. I regret that we couldn't actually have anybody who is a salary caster in this position, because their companies literally would not let them talk about this, which fucking sucks, because it would be nice to hear something from them as well. So that's about it. I also just disagree with some of Semmler's points and his refusal to use Occam's razor.
Monty, you can't deny reality. He represents reality in this discussion.
Occam's razor is firmly in my pocket right now.
Okay, so Semmler, it's your turn now. What would you like to say as a final message to the audience? Maybe some sort of screed of reality.
It's tough to say, man. I mean, thank you obviously all for tuning in and lasting this long. If you have made it to the very end, 2 hours and 25 minutes counting. So, I mean, I tend to drift towards the pessimistic and the darker side of things. But I do think that there is, obviously, if you intend to make a career out of this, there is definitely a light at the end of the tunnel for you. I feel like we're kind of in the middle right now of a formative period, and we're all learning about like where the fuck all of this goes. And so that's TOs, that's commentators, that's teams, that's everybody. So, I right now, the way that I see things is kind of dark, but I definitely think that there is, there is something to look forward to. And so we're all learning and working towards that point. So don't take my getting down on you all, as the end note. But I hope that at least I perhaps might have given you some kind of perspective on the other side. So thanks.
Semmler's just trying to kill any aspiring commentators' dreams before they can actually latch hold. That way he doesn't have any competition.
He's trying to bolster up the Riot casters right now so they don't come like taking his jobs in CSGO in a little bit.
Oh, they can come at me all day, bro. It's all good.
Okay. No, listen, mate, the grass ain't that much greener on this side. In fact, I think, you know what, you've got some pretty wicked grass over there, so you just stay over there, and I'll listen, it's hard over here. Like
in Riot's world, yes,
looks
they
tasty.
fucking do. If they want to stay in LoL, they can. They definitely have it pretty good with Riot, because they're getting a fucking salary and a monopoly. So there you go, right? They have no room to maneuver, zero room to maneuver, unless they group up as a group and actually negotiate as a group. They have nothing to work with. That is the world of the Riot commentator that I see.
Which is actually, I mean, it is just objectively, in my opinion, dumb that they haven't done that yet, because.
Yeah, and that's your opinion, and that's I kind of tend to go with you on this one as well. But unfortunately, that's the state that they exist in right now. Is that if they do not group up, then they have to be subjects to their fate.
Either you join together and fight, or you will be destroyed. Okay, right. So
or you will exist,
just ground out finally.
Yeah. You will be chained to the ore, and that is your existence. There you go.
Capitalist, hit me with what your final message is. I purposely left you till the end. You're going to bring some light to this, okay?
All right. Let's see. I'll go ahead and quote Socrates. I know that I know nothing, but fuck Riot.
Okay.
I think that's pretty much been the thing that I've gotten so far. It's between this whole entire argument is just that Riot sucks, and yeah, esports is in for some interesting formative periods for the next 3 years.
Right. I will end by explaining something using a joke. Okay. So there's a famous old joke that a lot of kids in England will know. Okay, and it goes like this. There's an Englishman, an Irishman, and a Scotsman, and they get stranded on a desert island. And one day, the Irishman's walking along the beach, and his foot kicks into something sticking out of the sand, and he pulls it out, and it's a genie in one of those lamps. He rubs the lamp, out comes the genie, and the genie says, like, whoever rubbed the lamp, like, I give 3 wishes, So since the other 2 were there, the Englishman, the Scotsman, they go, we should all get 1 wish each then, like, to be fair. So then I go, okay. So the genie says, what's the first wish then? So the Englishman says, well, I mean, it's been real being here with you guys and all that, but I'd actually like to be, back in the rolling green fields of England, the forests, like I really miss my home there. I'm sure my wife will be cooking good food at the moment. So Genie says, you know what, no problem, snaps his fingers, the Englishman disappears back to England. And the Scotsman says, well, I won't do an accent, like, yeah, he had the right idea, but obviously, like, fuck England, I want to go back to Scotland, like, I want to be near a loch, and I want to eat haggis, and I want to wear some sort of weird quasi-skirt, and I want all that in my life, because that's what being Scottish is about. And obviously the Genie just says, yeah, no problem, snaps his fingers, off they go back to Scotland. But at the end, he comes to the Irishman, he goes, what do you want? And the Irishman goes, well, I mean, depends where you come from, really. So my problem is I'm really lonely now. So I actually just wish that the other 2 could come back right now. And so all I wish for, Semmler, at the end of this episode is, after all of your petitioning, all of your pleas in favor of Riot, I wish that one day there is a League of Legends 2 and that you become a caster for Riot and that you live in that world, and then I will just send you links to certain parts of this video every now and then on social media or whatever, and I'll just say, like, you had the chance to destroy this world, Semmler, and you allow it to remain. So that's all I'm going to end on. That's going to be the end of the episode, and fuck donuts. That's the end.